Courting death? Look who's speaking here. Floating in the air, Zhang Xian glared down at the 8 youths beneath him with utterly cold eyes. You kidnapped my students and limited their freedom. With no regards to her will, you forced her to expend her strength to help you decipher the seal on the painting. Is this the kind of propriety that the 100 schools of philosophers abide by? Is this what you have inherited from Kong Shi? Even the final shred of goodwill that Zhang Xian harbored toward the 100 schools of philosophers had vanished by that point. Not only did they go around forcing the Luo clan and the Zhang clan to accept their challenges to acquire the celestial amulets of legacy, they even captured his students and collaborated together with the otherworldly demonic tribe. It seemed like they had already lost sight of what they stood for at the very start. We're doing this for mankind. One of the youths amid the group shouted angrily. For mankind? What a coincidence. What I'm going to do right now is for mankind as well. Get them. Zhang Xian replied with a cold sneer. Knowing that it was meaningless to argue with the other party, he flicked his wrist. Voila! The 5 monarchs and countless weapons materialized around the area and charged for the 8 youths from the 100 schools of philosophers. The 8 youths did not think that Zhang Xian would make a move on them without any hesitation. They were angered by his actions, but given the current situation, they had no choice but to focus their effort on fending off the incoming enemies. Teacher. Seeing that her teacher was confronting the youths from the 100 schools of philosophers directly, worry rippled in the depths of Zhao Ye's eyes. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Don't worry, I'm not so weak as to be done in by them. Tell me how you were kidnapped by them and what happened afterward. I'll redress your grievances. Zhang Xian said. This was what happened. Zhao Ye began to recount her story. Back to the time at the Empire Alliance City, she ordered the members of the Glacier Plain Court to return back to the city of Glacier, while she remained in the Empire Alliance for a period of time to reinforce her cultivation. Wei Rian also stayed behind to protect her during her cultivation. Thinking that there would be few who were able to pose a threat to the two of them, Zhang Xian did not think much about it and returned to the Zhang clan. But just when the two of them were finally about to leave Empire Alliance City, they encountered a young man. The young man did not make a move on them right away. Instead, he informed them that he was from the 100 schools of philosophers, and there was something important that he needed their help with. However, due to confidentiality issues, he could not tell them what it was yet. Naturally, the two of them could not possibly accept such a questionable request. Thus, they ended up battling one another, and they swiftly found themselves being outmatched and captured. By the time they realized that they were in a dire situation, it was already too late for them to send any help messages out. After that, they were confined in a solitary location. However, the other party did not mistreat them. Instead, they supplied them with sufficient cultivation resources to further their cultivation, and there were even experts who helped them on the difficulties that they were facing with their cultivation. On top of that, they imparted the method to deciphering the seal to them. As for the reason that Zhao Ye had been in a trance earlier, it was actually in order to protect her. The seal on the canvas of 4 seasons was extremely powerful, and it would inflict tremendous pressure on one's mind while trying to decipher it. Through placing her in a trance, the chances of her losing concentration and sustaining irrecoverable damage would be significantly lowered. Despite their forceful measures, you went along with them and did whatever they asked you to. Why? Zhang Xian frowned. He knew Zhao Ye's personality very well. She was an obstinate individual who would never yield to force. When had she become so obedient as to obey the orders of someone who had kidnapped her? This was completely unlike the Zhao Ye that he knew. They said that. At this point, Zhao Ye's face reddened as she bit her lips. As long as I helped them to decipher the seal, they would offer you an opportunity to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage. Offer me an opportunity to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage? Zhang Xian was taken aback. That's right. They said that you are the most talented master teacher on the master teacher continent. The roots of both the 100 schools of philosophers and the master teacher pavilion trace back to Kong Shi, and they be considered close allies. As long as we were willing to do them this favor, they would reciprocate as well. Xiaoya replied awkwardly. So you followed their instructions. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian felt both a little angry and touched at the same time. Sighing deeply, he shook his head and said, I appreciate your intentions, but when have I ever succumbed to a challenge before? It might be difficult to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage, but I haven't fallen so far that I need to sacrifice my own students in exchange for an opportunity for a breakthrough. Rest assured, if there's truly such an opportunity in the world, I will be able to obtain it with my own strength. Teacher, I was wrong. Xiaoya's voice grew a little meek. All right. Zhang Xian waved his hand. Considering that you had good intentions, I won't pursue this matter any further. After which, he turned in the direction of the 8 youths and ordered, Stop! Hula! The 5 monarchs and his many great sage artifacts swiftly returned to Zhang Xian's side, leaving 8 incapacitated youths lying powerlessly on the ground. The pummeling that they had been put under had completely ruined their dashing appearance. This is just a small punishment for kidnapping my students. Anyone who dares to touch my students will have to bear the consequences of their actions. Since Xiaoya hasn't sustained any injuries as a result of your doings, I'll spare your lives. However, I want you to answer my questions first before I set you free. Looking at the 8 youths on the ground coldly, he asked, Firstly, what is the 100 schools of philosophers intending to achieve by snooping around and kidnapping my students? Secondly, has the 100 schools of philosophers already allied with the otherworldly demonic tribe? Or could it be that you have converted those otherworldly demons into your subordinates? Upon learning that those of the 100 schools of philosophers did not intend to harm Xiaoya, a thought surfaced in his mind. Could it be possible that the otherworldly demons, whom he had seen alongside the 100 schools of philosophers, were actually their subordinates? He, for example, had managed to forge a soulless metal humanoid out of an otherworldly demon ancient sage, and he had Vicious subdued in his Book of Heaven's Path as well. However, that did not mean that he was working with the otherworldly demonic tribe. The 100 schools of philosophers might have something similar to that. We are only obeying the orders from our superiors. We aren't too sure about the specific details of the matter, so pardon us for being unable to answer your question. One of the youths answered while hissing in pain. You are unable to answer my question? Zhang Xian gazed down at the youth intently, as if peering right into his mind. Faced with Zhang Xian's eyes, the youth hesitated for a moment before replying affirmatively. Yes. It's fine if you are unwilling to speak. I'll find out soon enough. Now scram. Zhang Xian turned around and flung his sleeves coldly. He was indebted to Kong Shi, and ancient sage Bo Shang and ancient sage Ran Xiao had indirectly helped him as well. Since these youths were their descendants, and it did not seem like they had forsaken mankind to ally themselves with the otherworldly demons, there was no need for him to claim their lives. We aren't leaving. One of the youths protested resolutely. Throw them out. Zhang Xian commanded imposingly. The 5 monarchs and the many great sage artifacts charged forward once more. And it did not take long for the 8 youths to be thrown right out of the Hall of Great Accomplishment. Without Xiaoya's unique constitution escorting them in, they would not be able to enter the subordinate hall again. After dealing with the youths from the 100 schools of philosophers, Zhang Xian finally turned his gaze back to the canvas of 4 seasons. The snow in the painting had mostly melted, and the seal had assumed another form. It was completely different from the seal that Xiaoya had spent so much effort deciphering earlier. Teacher, the seal has changed. The seal releasing technique that I have learned won't work on it anymore, Xiaoya said anxiously with a pale face. She tried to channel her cold energy toward the seal, but she realized that she was unable to control the seal anymore. The attribute of the seal placed on the painting had already changed accordingly to match the season of the painting. Don't worry, I have my own ways. Zhang Xian chuckled softly as he flicked his finger. Wang. The icy crystal that he had obtained earlier materialized before him, and he lightly pushed it forward. Hu! The icy crystal immediately surged toward the seal, and as soon as it came into contact with the seal, it began to revolve on the spot. It swiftly formed a vortex that devoured the seal on the painting in the blink of an eye. Seeing that the icy crystal was indeed effective against the seal, just as little amulet had said, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly beckoned the Xingming sword saints over. Let's head in to take a look. Following which, he took the lead and stepped into the unsealed painting. The others also quickly followed suit without any hesitation. Silence returned to the majestic hall. Those who had reached the pinnacle of painting were capable of constructing worlds that anyone could enter and live in. More frighteningly, the world that they created could be so lifelike that one would not even realize that one was in a painting. It was said that tens of thousands of years ago, the Painter Guild had been blessed with a painter of unparalleled talent. He had created his masterpiece, consisting of a massive world and a ravishing beauty, when he was in his prime. Obsessed with his work, he had spent much time in his masterpiece along with the ravishing beauty, and as time passed, he had even fallen in love with the ravishing beauty. One day, he had entered the painting and never left it again. As a painting created by Kong Shi himself, the canvas of 4 seasons was a work far above the tier of any 9-star painter, be it in terms of conceptualization of the work or the grasp of space-time. The painting was almost no different from a massive folded space, where the end was nowhere in sight. There's spiritual energy within this painting, and it's extremely concentrated at that. Standing on top of a boulder, Zhang Xian took a deep breath, and he could not help but be astounded by the capabilities of Kong Shi. There was no doubt that this painting had surpassed the level of 9-star painters, achieving the realm of unadorned reality. Everything that was within the painting felt perfectly natural, such that it was impossible to discern any difference between it and the world outside. With an attack of the Dragonbone Divine Spear, Zhang Xian was still able to open dimension rifts within the painting and traverse through it. More astoundingly, the dimension rifts would slowly repair themselves as well. Had he not known that it was a painting, he would have never been able to imagine that it was a simulation of reality. Zhang Xian swiftly found a clearing before calling the shocked Xingming sword saints over. Give it a try and see if you are able to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage here. As his cultivation was only at Aurit body realm consummation, he was unable to sense the quality that was required for one to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage. However, his parents were already at sempiternal realm consummation, and they were just a step away from reaching that legendary level. Knowing that there was bound to be a reason behind their son's words, the duo swiftly sat down and began cultivating quietly. Find authorized novels and webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Hung Long Long. As they began cultivating, the spiritual energy in the area swiftly converged on them and surged into their bodies. Slowly, their auras grew stronger and stronger. Some time later, the two of them halted their cultivation and stood up. We are able to feel the bottleneck of our cultivation, and it feels like we'll be able to overcome the bottleneck with sufficient time. At this rate, it might really be possible for us to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage. Sword Saint Ming said. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. It was only a deduction from him and Little Amulet that one would be able to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage in the canvas of 4 seasons. However, if that was truly the case, the value of this painting was truly phenomenal. Since that's the case, why don't you two try to push for a breakthrough right now? Zhang Xian suggested with a smile. Considering how he had kicked out the offspring of the 100 schools of philosophers, it was likely that the ancient sage who had stopped him from entering the pavilion of frozen winter earlier would be enraged. If his parents could achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage right now, they would at least be less defenseless against other ancient sages. Right now, hearing those words, the Xingming sword saints exchanged glances before shaking their heads bitterly. You are thinking too lightly of ancient sages. It's true that a fragmented piece of the ancient world is sealed here, and the quality of the air in here allows one to take the final step forward and achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage. However, Sword Saint Xing said, it will still take a lot of time and effort in order to do so. It's not something that can be achieved in the spur of the moment. Even among Kong Shi's 3,000 students, only 72 of them successfully reached ancient sage. This is not an undertaking that anyone can succeed in. It's true that the aura lingering in this painting is crucial to achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage. But if one's accumulation is insufficient, the presence of the quality in the air won't make any difference. Zhang Xian was startled for a moment before nodding. You're right. His parents were right. Reaching ancient sage was a major breakthrough, and it was highly demanding on one's comprehension of the world. If one could not even meet the prerequisites for a breakthrough, it was impossible to succeed, even if one was in a suitable environment. Even in the ancient era, not every cultivator was able to become an ancient sage. Those who were able to reach that realm were all top-notch geniuses. What exactly is the quality in the air that allows one to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage? Zhang Xian asked. I can't point out exactly what it is either, but I do know that people named it the Aeon of Ancient Sages. As long as one's accumulation reaches a certain level, one will be able to tap into the Aeon of Ancient Sages to rise to greater heights. Sword Saint Xing explained. Aeon of Ancient Sages? Zhang Xian nodded contemplatively. Does this thing exist naturally in our environment, or is it something that could be depleted? There aren't any records as to where the Aeon of Ancient Sages comes from, and why it exists in our world, so I have no way of answering your question for sure. Sword Saint Xing explained slowly. However, based on my deduction, it's likely to be a depletable resource just like rare ores. Once we run out of it, it'll be nigh impossible to bring it back. Back when people realized that it was no longer possible to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage, a huge panic broke out amid the upper echelons of the master-teacher continent. There were many remarkable talents who had already accumulated enough to push for a breakthrough, but for some reason, they just weren't able to take the final step forward. It was also around that period of time that they discovered the existence of the Aeon of Ancient Sages. As the ex-head of the Zhang clan, he had heard of this story from his predecessor. The realization that no one was able to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage anymore had cast a cloak of despair over the master-teacher continent. Those who had cultivated all their life and reached sempiternal realm consummation, with much difficulty, suddenly found their cultivation limited. No matter how hard they pushed themselves, they had simply been unable to advance any further. It was inevitable that they would be terrified. Furthermore, the otherworldly demons had also made use of the opportunity to launch attacks on the master-teacher continent. It had truly been a period of nightmares for mankind. Humans had nearly succumbed to despair then. It was fortunate that the ancient sages had then decided to devote their lives to protecting mankind by going into hibernation, realizing that they were still able to fend against the otherworldly demons for the time being. The panic had gradually calmed down. Were it not for the sacrifices made by the ancient sages, mankind would have already ceased to exist. I understand that the Aeon of Ancient Sages is a crucial quality to making a breakthrough to ancient sage. But exactly what else is required other than that? Zhang Xian asked. His parents had said that they were unable to achieve a breakthrough due to their accumulation being insufficient. But what exactly did that mean? What did they have to accumulate that was insufficient? Or to put it in other words, what requirements did one have to meet in order to push for a breakthrough to the highest realm? Ever since ancient times, ancient sages have been the symbol of the highest fighting prowess in the world. There has been a lot of research done on it to study the requirements in order to achieve a breakthrough to that pinnacle realm. Firstly, the presence of the Aeon of Ancient Sages is necessary. Secondly, one's soul depth must reach 30. Thirdly, one must achieve a soul span of 1,000,000 kilometers. Sword Saint Xing explained. Soul span of 1,000,000 kilometers? Zhang Xian frowned. What does that mean? He could understand the first two requirements that Sword Saint Xing had mentioned. But what did the third one mean? It's really simple. When you refine your soul energy into a soul thread and extend it outward, the longest distance that your soul thread is able to reach will be your soul span. Zhang Xian fell into deep thought. His soul had been tempered by lightning and heavenly flames, making it extraordinarily powerful. He had also used his soul energy to perceive his surroundings before. However, he had never tried threading his soul energy and extending it as far as possible. Seeing the expression on Zhang Xian's face, Sword Saint Xing could tell that his son had never tried testing his soul span before. So he asked with a chuckle, "Do you want to give it a try and see what your soul span is?" Those who were unaware of the conditions required to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage would not bother testing their souls in such a manner. It was dangerous to spread one's soul too far outward. If the soul thread snapped, one could potentially incur severe damage. "All right, I'll give it a try." Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. He was also curious how far he could go. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian began refining his soul energy into a soul thread before pushing it outward. 100,000 kilometers, 200,000 kilometers, 300,000 kilometers. In the blink of an eye, he had already passed the 500,000 kilometers mark, but his soul thread showed no signs of slowing down. In fact, he realized that he had not even used a tenth of his soul energy yet. Zhang Xian finally came to a halt. "How is it?" the Xingming Sword Saints asked curiously. They knew that their son was the head of the Jiang clan and had a soul oracle student. Without a doubt, he was likely to be highly proficient in the field of soul arts. However, they were not too sure what realm he had reached, so it was inevitable for them to be interested in his results. Zhang Xian scratched his head awkwardly. "The world in here is simply too small. My soul thread has already reached the end of the world. While this was a world that Kong Shi had created through extraordinary means, it was ultimately still a folded space. There was no way that it could be boundless like the Master-Teacher continent. All in all, the world was less than 1,000,000 kilometers wide in diameter. It was not large enough for him to push himself to his limits. However, if one thing was for sure, when it came to souls, he was already comparable to the ancient sages. Of course, he would only be comparable to them in terms of quantity. When it came to quality, he was severely lacking. At the very most, he would only be able to protect himself from the soul offense of the ancient sages. He was still lacking sufficient power to be able to quell experts of that level. Even though the world in the painting is small, the fact that you were able to reach the end of the world shows that you possess extraordinary soul span. As long as you raise your soul depth and cultivation up to the mark, you should be able to reach ancient sage. Sword Saint Xing remarked in astonishment. His son's talent was truly overpowered. While other cultivators struggled to keep up with their soul span, even after their cultivation had reached sempiternal realm consummation, he had already met the requirement despite only being at aureate body realm consummation. Perhaps, the bottleneck that had made ancient sage unreachable to most cultivators might be a mere mini hurdle for him, just like any other cultivation realms. Actually, it's not too difficult to increase your soul span. I have a soul cultivation technique manual over here that you too can cultivate. Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and took out a book. As one who had comprehended the soul quintessence and inherited the heritage of the soul oracles, he had long formed his own school of study regarding souls. The soul cultivation technique manual that he was offering to the Xingming Sword Saints was tailored to the constitution of those in the Jiang clan. As it was completely unrelated to the heritage of the Jiang clan, it could not be considered betraying the Jiang clan's secrets. This cultivation technique is indeed highly effective in increasing one's soul span. As long as we cultivate it diligently, we should be able to reach a soul span of 1,000,000 kilometers within a month. Sword Saint Xing remarked in agitation, after swiftly browsing through the manual. I'm looking forward to the day that you two become ancient sages," Zhang Xian said with a chuckle. "I'm glad that you think highly of the two of us, but it really isn't as easy as that." Sword Saint Xing shook his head. Other than the 3 core requirements, there are many other factors that can affect the possibility of one's breakthrough to ancient sage, such as one's understanding of cultivation, one's ability to harmonize with the world, one's state of mind. In any case, a breakthrough to ancient sage is truly no easy feat. As powerful as your soul cultivation technique is, it'll only increase our chances of success by 10%. Only 10%. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Indeed, stepping into the ancient sage realm symbolizes overcoming one's fundamental limits to reach a higher level of existence. To make an analogy, it's no different from a carp leaping across the dragon's gate. One's constitution changes completely, including one's meridians. There's no way to make that leap that easily, Sword Saint Xing explained. However, before he could finish his piece, he suddenly felt the world around him quaking intensely. Surges of spiritual energy were swiftly gathering in a certain direction. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Following which, an overwhelming burst of energy gushed into the heavens, splitting the world in half. Someone is achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage. Sword Saint Xing widened his eyes in disbelief. He felt as if his head was going to explode. Not a moment earlier, he had said that it would be incredibly difficult to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage. Who in the world was it? Sword Saint Xing quickly turned his sight to the center of the vortex, and he saw an eerie-looking saber floating quietly in the air, greedily devouring the spiritual energy, an aeon of ancient sages in the air. Its strength swiftly grew greater and greater. It was as if rivers of spiritual energy were filling up an ocean. The flow of energy was so quick that it caused the saber to shake non-stop. This is your weapon? Sword Saint Xing gulped. The dazed Zhang Xian nodded in response. He was taken aback by the situation as well. The one that was achieving a breakthrough at the moment was the infernal black saber. He did not place it back into his storage ring after chasing the 8 youths from the 100 schools of philosophers away, so it had ended up following him into the canvas of 4 seasons. In the first place, the infernal black saber was a half-ancient sage artifact, and it had devoured the fresh blood and souls of 110,000 otherworldly demon soldiers. It had already accumulated enough for a breakthrough, but it had just been lacking the final catalyst to do so. The aeon of ancient sages in the painting just so happened to be what it lacked, thus allowing it to successfully advance to ancient sage. Walala! A tremendous amount of spiritual energy swept across the area as if hurricanes, causing the ground to tremor intensely. As the infernal black saber continued to absorb spiritual energy furiously from the painting, the surrounding space began to dissipate. The spiritual energy in here isn't sufficient for it to make a breakthrough. If this goes on, I fear that the world in the painting will be completely destroyed. Sword Saint Xing narrowed his eyes in horror. Usually, when a cultivator pushed for a breakthrough to ancient sage, they would prepare ample cultivation resources, so that they would not abruptly run out of energy in the midst of their breakthrough. However, the infernal black saber was just a weapon, so it was inevitable that it would neglect something like that. Zhang Xian had not expected it to achieve a breakthrough at that moment, so he had not made preparations in advance. If they were on the master-teacher continent, there might still have been ample spiritual energy in the air to sustain its breakthrough. However, they were in a painting. Considering how its foundations were not too stable in the first place, the surrounding space was already starting to collapse due to the strain that it was under. At that rate, the entire painting might just be utterly destroyed. It had not been easy for him to find the aeon of ancient sages required for one to make a breakthrough to ancient sage. It would be a huge waste if the painting was destroyed just like that. Infernal black saber, absorb this. Knowing that there was no time to lose, Zhang Xian flicked his finger. Hula! A droplet of blood harnessing a concentrated reservoir of energy surged toward the infernal black saber. It was the blood that old geezer you had shed after he was injured. The old ancestor of the Zhang clan had collected the blood and given it to him. If there was anything that he had that could provide sufficient energy for the infernal black saber to achieve a breakthrough, it was that. Easy. As soon as the infernal black saber came into contact with the blood, it swiftly absorbed it. However, it seemed like the spiritual energy harnessed within a single droplet was not enough for its breakthrough. Thus, Zhang Xian flicked the other droplets of blood over one after another. Soon, he had already depleted all 5 droplets of old geezer Yu's blood. It was only after absorbing the 5th droplet of blood that the infernal black saber finally calmed down. An aura of invincibility drifted off from its body, and it felt as if it could split the painting in two and escape with just a single slash. Hong long long. A dimension rift appeared in the sky of the painting. An ominous cloud swiftly gushed in. It was a cultivation ordeal, the ancient sage ordeal. Under normal circumstances, it would have been impossible for one to summon a cultivation ordeal within a folded space. However, the ancient sage ordeal was simply so powerful that the world within the painting was not able to stop it. Kacha! Lightning and heavenly flames descended from the sky and shrouded the infernal black saber. The infernal black saber swiftly channeled the remaining energy from old Geezer Yu's blood to alleviate the destructive might from the cultivation ordeal, allowing it to absorb the energy safely. Slowly, crimson marks surfaced on its blade. Under the tempering of the lightning and heavenly flames, the infernal black saber became more and more sinister. Just a glance at it was more than enough to unnerve one's will. Some time later, the ominous clouds finally began to dissipate, leaving the infernal black saber floating quietly in the air. With a light slash, the space in the painting was sliced apart as easily as a blob of tofu. I have finally reached ancient sage. Ha ha ha. The infernal black saber burst into laughter, following which, it turned to Zhang Xian and kneeled on the floor. Thank you, master. Rise. With a wave of his hand, the infernal black saber fell into Zhang Xian's hand. He immediately felt the destructive energy harnessed within it. Before, he would need to resort to all kinds of means in order to defeat a sempiternal realm consummation expert. However, with the infernal black saber in his grasp, he would be able to easily slay dozens of sempiternal realm consummation experts with just a simple slash. Even though there was only a realm of difference between ancient sage and sempiternal realm, the gap between the two realms was as great as the distance between the heavens and the earth. This difference was not something that could be breached with just quantity. I'll finally be able to protect myself from other ancient sages now. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in agitation. Even though the golden page did grant him the ability to kill other ancient sages, it had its limitations too. For example, if old Geezer Yu had continued hiding quietly, he would have been unable to do anything about the other party, even if he had the golden page in mind. However, the situation was completely different now that the infernal black saber had reached ancient sage. If old Geezer Yu made a move on him again, the infernal black saber would surely be able to trace the origin of his aura and injure him. That was also how the old ancestor of the Zhang clan managed to drive old Geezer Yu away. This was another invaluable trump card in his possession. If he used it together with the otherworldly demon ancient sage corpse, he would be able to kill other ancient sages in a surprise assault. He was no longer as reliant on the golden page as he was before. Alright, you should reinforce your cultivation, Zhang Xian instructed. The infernal black saber nodded, and it began flitting into the distance to find a quiet spot to cultivate. However, before it could get far, it ran into the Dragonbone Divine Spear, which was making its way over. It hurriedly bowed respectfully to the latter before going on its way. It was only after reaching Ancient Sage that the infernal black saber realized just how powerful the seal placed on the Dragonbone Divine Spear was. Once its seal was released, there was no doubt that it would not stand a chance at all against the Dragonbone Divine Spear. Xianer, your spear. Upon seeing this sight, Sword Saint Xing widened his eyes in astonishment. The hierarchy among artifacts was extremely straightforward. They would only bow to artifacts stronger to them. If the infernal black saber had paid its respects to the Dragonbone Divine Spear, did it not mean that the latter was even stronger than an ancient sage artifact? He knew that the Dragonbone Divine Spear was no ordinary power, but he was not too sure just how powerful it was. It's nothing much. It's just another minor fortuitous encounter, Zhang Xian explained with a smile. It's just another small fortuitous encounter. Sword Saint Xing staggered on the spot and nearly broke down. Do you have some kind of misunderstanding as to what minor fortuitous encounter means? If your Dragonbone Divine Spear, Infernal Black Saber, and all those great sage artifacts you have are only minor fortuitous encounters, what in the world could be called a major fortuitous encounter? Wait here for a moment. I'll go tame this painting. Without explaining himself, Zhang Xian quickly made his way toward a certain direction. Not too long later, he arrived before a cave. With a simple grasp, a scroll appeared in his hand. It was the original painting of the canvas of 4 seasons. He had found the painting while threading his soul energy together to extend it as far as he could. With a few taps, the painting swiftly acknowledged him as its master, and he stowed it into his storage ring. Hula! With a jolt, the Xingming sword saints suddenly found themselves returning to the hall. They instinctively turned their sights toward where the painting had been placed previously, only to find that it had completely disappeared from sight. A short moment later, Zhang Xian also left the painting and materialized on the spot. Do you want to cultivate here or follow me? The greatest treasure in the Hall of Great Accomplishment was the canvas of 4 seasons. However, the sculptures of the 72 sages, the rich spiritual energy, and the inscriptions on the walls were all invaluable resources for cultivation as well. They would be able to advance their cultivation tenfold faster in the hall than anywhere else. The Xingming sword saints glanced at one another before shaking their heads in unison. We won't be following you anymore. It's peaceful here, and it's a good opportunity for us to cultivate our souls and state of mind, as well as to assimilate the ancient sage blood. We'll try to achieve a breakthrough here. They had realized that they would only be a burden to their son if they followed him with their current strength. Since that was the case, it would be better for them to remain in the Hall of Great Accomplishment and cultivate. If they could achieve a breakthrough to Ancient Sage, they might still be able to continue supporting their son in his endeavors. I'll remain here too, Hu Yaoyao said. She had only recently achieved a breakthrough to the introspective convalescence realm, and she would be even more of a burden if she insisted on following Zhang Xian around. Zhaoye stepped forward and said, Teacher, I'll follow you. I know where they took Wei Ruyan and Yuan Tao. Zhang Xian nodded. He pondered for a moment before flicking his finger, sending a droplet of ancient sage blood toward Zhaoye. Absorb this droplet of blood first. Many dangers lay ahead of them. Even though every droplet of ancient sage blood was an invaluable treasure, there was nothing more important to him than his student's safety. Yes. Zhaoye quickly sat down and absorbed the droplet of blood into her body. Power flurried through her body, but in less than 10 minutes, she stood up once more with brilliant light shining from her eyes. Have you managed to assimilate the ancient sage blood? Zhang Xian asked in astonishment. The reason for him being able to assimilate the blood swiftly was because the blood from the old ancestor had originated from him. However, why was Zhaoye able to do it so quickly as well? Yes, teacher. Zhaoye nodded. After you reconstructed my meridians, I realized that I am able to convert any energy into my Jinqi swiftly. Even though the droplet of blood harnesses a lot of energy, it still doesn't pose too much of a problem for me to assimilate it. Meridians? Zhang Xian frowned. He tapped his finger and sent a surge of Jinqi into Zhaoye's body to check on her condition. It seemed like after the alteration in Zhaoye's meridians, her ability to assimilate energy into her body had become far stronger than other cultivators. In that respect, even Zhang Xian would pale in comparison to her. Then again, considering how her meridian network was even more rational than that of an ancient sage, it was no wonder that she had been able to assimilate ancient sage blood so swiftly. Let's go. The fact that Zhaoye had assimilated the ancient sage blood meant that she, at the very least, had a life preservation method if anything bad happened. Bidding farewell to his parents, Zhang Xian began making his way out of the Hall of Great Accomplishment together with Zhaoye. Looking at the departing duo, a bitter smile crept onto Sword Saint Xing's face as he remarked, He might be my son, but I have to say that he and his students are really overpowered. Just to assimilate a droplet of ancient sage blood, they had to store it in their dantian and absorb it bit by bit over a month or so. On the other hand, those two were actually able to assimilate it into their bodies within moments. This was truly an inconceivable feat. We need to work much harder as well. Otherwise, if our son and his students surpass us, we won't be able to maintain our dignity as elders before them. Sword Saint Ming said. Indeed, indeed. Sword Saint Xing nodded. The two of them sat down on the floor and began cultivating. Old ancestor, you have to redress our grievances. Outside the Hall of Great Accomplishment, the 8 youths who had been driven out were crying with snot and tears dripping down their faces. They had dedicated much time and effort to preparing for the expedition, before they were finally able to get into the Hall of Great Accomplishment. They had never expected that they would be viciously pummeled before being thrown out of the subordinate hall, before they could acquire anything at all. You can only blame yourselves for your lack of strength, the hidden ancient sage remarked with a hint of resignation in his tone. It's not that we are weak, but that fellow has tamed so many beasts and powerful artifacts. If not for those, there's no way that he would have been a match for us. One of the youths gritted his teeth hatefully. What was great about that fellow? All he had were his tamed beasts and artifacts. Without those two, there was no way that he would have stood a chance against them. That's right, old ancestor. We beseech you to create a chance for us to have a fair duel with him. If he's able to defeat us without those external aids, we'll willingly admit our defeat. The other youths quickly nodded in agreement. The old ancestor were silent for a moment before speaking up once more. Brother Hongtian, my descendants would like to have a fair duel with your descendant. Will you grant me this favor? Feel free to discuss any arrangements with my descendant. Rest assured, as long as you don't resort to anything unprincipled, I don't intend to intervene in his matters. The old ancestor of the Zhang clan said. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. While Zhang Xian and the others had entered the Hall of Great Accomplishment, he had remained hidden in the vicinity. That's a relief, the old ancestor of the 100 schools of philosophers replied. Who? The seal of the Hall of Great Accomplishment glowed, and Zhang Xian and Zhao Ye flew out. Where do you think you're going? The 8 youths with a couple of others from the 100 schools of philosophers swiftly surrounded the two of them as soon as they appeared. What? Do you still want a pummeling? Zhang Xian harumphed coldly. He had already spared their lives, but they did not know gratitude. Did they really think that he was a pushover? We want a fair duel with you one-on-one. You aren't allowed to your weapons or tamed beasts. Do you dare take up our challenge? One of the youths spat coldly. Fair duel? What are the stakes then? Zhang Xian shot a nonchalant glance at the youth. Without any stakes involved, he could not be bothered to waste his time fighting a meaningless battle with this crowd. Before the youth could reply, the voice of the ancient sage sounded in the air. Earlier, Brother Hongtian gave you 5 droplets of ancient sage blood. If you are able to win the duel with them, I'll also offer you 5 droplets of ancient sage blood as the wager. This is the stake that we are willing to offer. What do you have to offer us then? What do I have to offer? Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before saying, I can spare their lives. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. The ancient sage suddenly felt an uncomfortable throbbing in his heart. In the first place, it's uncertain who will win in the duel. Furthermore, I have offered you 5 droplets of ancient sage blood. But is this really all you have to offer me? Are you that certain that you'll be able to win? If you lose to us, you have to hand over the canvas of 4 seasons. Indeed, you have to bring out the canvas of 4 seasons as your wager. The other youths shouted vehemently. However, before they could finish their piece, they found Zhang Xian looking at them with a gaze that seemed as though he was looking at fools. Are you dreaming? Do you think those few droplets of blood from your old ancestor are worth me bringing out the canvas of 4 seasons as a wager? Then, your wager won't work either. If you lose the duel, we will have nothing to gain from the battle. The crowd from the 100 schools of philosophers protested furiously. The ancient sage from the 100 schools of philosophers felt even more stifled than before. That isn't any of my business, is it? It's not as if I'm really interested in having this duel with you. If you don't want to battle me, we can always call the duel off, Zhang Xian uttered as he stretched his back lazily. He had not intended to duel with those from the 100 schools of philosophers in the first place, so it was not as if it would hurt him dearly not to have the duel. How about this? We'll bet 5 droplets of blood for an opportunity to achieve a breakthrough in your canvas of 4 seasons, the ancient sage from the 100 schools of philosophers suggested. That wager does sound fair to me, but I'm only at Aurit body realm consummation, whereas your descendants are all sempiternal realm consummation cultivators. There are 2 realms of difference between us. So isn't it extremely disadvantageous for me to be unable to use my artifacts and tame beasts? Zhang Xian said. I'll have them lower their cultivation to your level. The ancient sage from the 100 schools of philosophers replied. It was indeed unfair for them to impose so many restrictions on the other party, and yet send cultivators of higher realms against him. That would be great. Let's begin then. Zhang Xian nodded before taking a step forward. With a light chuckle he remarked. So that we don't waste each other's time, you may come at me together. However, if you come at me all at once, I might not be able to hold myself back. I'll have to ask for your pardon if a couple of you lose your lives in the process. You want to kill us? Try it then. One of the youths sneered coldly. He suppressed his cultivation down to Aureate Body Realm Consummation before charging toward Zhang Xian, making the first move. Using some mysterious secret art, the movement of the youth became extremely swift. In the blink of an eye, the youth had already arrived before Zhang Xian, and his palm struck diagonally down toward Zhang Xian's head. In that instant, the youth thought that he had already gotten Zhang Xian for good, but before his palm could connect, he suddenly felt a sharp sensation in his chest as air gushed out of his lungs. Turning his eyes downward, he found that the other party's palm had already sunk right into his chest. Pung! The youth flew into the distance before he crashed wretchedly on the floor, coughing out huge mouthfuls of blood. To his astonishment, he could not even discern how Zhang Xian had made a move on him at all. It was as if the other party's palm had simply teleported right in front of him. Come at me together. There's no way any of you stand a chance against me in a one-on-one. Zhang Xian shot a glance at the remaining youths. Let's get him together. The crowd had seen the earlier exchange, and they realized that the other party's fighting prowess was far greater than theirs in the same cultivation realm. There was no way that they could possibly hope to defeat him alone. Without hesitating for long, they nodded at one another before charging at the other party simultaneously. Pung 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 pung. Before the crowd could even reach Zhang Xian, the person in question had already charged right into them. As if a tiger around a pack of lambs, there was not a single person who was able to withstand a blow from him. They were the top geniuses from the 100 schools of philosophers, and they had prided themselves on their superior fighting prowess against their peers. Yet, before the young man before them, the strength that they were so confident of was so laughably pathetic that it seemed as if they were little kids parading before an adult. How could he be so powerful? Witnessing this scene, the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers could swiftly tell that his descendants had lost the battle. Even though the other party was only at Aureate Body Realm Consummation, his true fighting prowess was already on par with sempiternal realm cultivators. Of the entire 100 schools of philosophers, the only one known to possess such superior capability was Kong Shiyao. Watching the battle a little longer, it was painfully apparent that even in a group battle, they were not close to being a match for Zhang Xian. As much as he did not want to admit it, the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers still sighed deeply and advised, "You aren't a match for him. Admit defeat." However, barely after he spoke those words, an unexpected situation occurred. Under the relentless assault from the group from the 100 schools of philosophers, Zhang Xian accidentally made a fatal mistake, leaving him open for a brief moment. One of the youths keenly noticed this opportunity and pierced his finger toward Zhang Xian's blind spot. In the face of this unexpected crisis, perhaps it was because Zhang Xian thought that it was too late for him to avoid the attack. He lifted his palm to strike the youth's head instead. This was a move of mutually assured destruction. The youth might be able to pierce his finger through Zhang Xian's heart, but he would also have his head smashed to bits by the latter and die on the spot. More importantly, judging from the frightening momentum of the duo's movements, it was already too late for them to retract their attacks. Halt! The ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers roared anxiously. A powerful surge of energy swiftly shrouded the entire area, sealing the surrounding space. It seemed like the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers had decided to make a move in order to prevent a tragedy from happening. However, a moment after he released his energy, the young man below, who was moments away from having his heart pierced, suddenly moved in an awkward trajectory and mysteriously avoided the deadly move. Following which, a saber materialized in his palm. Voila! To the astonishment of the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers, the target of the saber was not his descendants but him. That is an ancient sage weapon. The ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers narrowed his eyes in shock. He did not think that the young man would intentionally reveal a flaw, just to lure him into making a move and confirm his location. He immediately attempted to flee, but it was already too late. The saber had wrapped its aura around him, keeping him firmly in place. Puha! A sharp glint flashed across the air, and fresh blood spurted in the air. Haha! You have my deepest gratitude for your generosity. Zhang Xian chuckled softly, as he swiftly caught all of the blood with a gourd that he had prepared. All in all, there were over 20 droplets of blood. Those 5 droplets of ancient sage blood were no longer enough for him to make a move. From the very start, this was what he was aiming for. The ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers had been polite to him on the surface, but he had overlooked the despicable actions committed by his descendants, turning a blind eye as they kidnapped his students and made use of them for their own gain. Not only so, he had even used his powers to suppress him, so as to stop him from getting to Zhaoya. There was no way that he would miss an opportunity to get even with the other party. Having lost too much blood, the face of the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers paled from frailty. Infuriated by the sudden assault, he was just about to make a move when he suddenly felt an imposing aura raging by the side. It was the old ancestor of the Zhang clan, Zhang Hongtian, warning him against making a move on his descendant. Knowing that he could not afford to fight with Zhang Hongtian at the moment, he suppressed his raging fury and held himself back. To think that an ancient sage like him had actually been fooled by an aurate body realm brat, even suffering injuries in the process. Such a thing was completely unthinkable. The young head of the Zhang clan sure is a remarkable figure. I am impressed. Our 100 schools of philosophers admit our loss. Farewell. Hula! With a powerful gale, the ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers swiftly pulled his descendants back to his side before turning around, preparing to leave the area. Wait a moment. Where are the 5 droplets of ancient sage blood that you promised me for losing the challenge? Are you intending to renege on your promise? Zhang Xian shouted after the ancient sage. The ancient sage of the 100 schools of philosophers staggered upon hearing those words. He nearly spurted out a mouthful of fresh blood. Suppressing the stifled feeling in his chest, he flicked a jade bottle over before leaving decisively. He was afraid that he would be choked to death if he continued conversing with the young man. That's more like it. Catching the jade bottle, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. Those who wanted to force him into a duel had to pay a corresponding price for their actions. Not even ancient sages would be an exception to that rule. Your saber's made a breakthrough to ancient sage, has it? The old ancestor of the Zhang clan asked in shock. He could hardly believe what he had just seen. Zhang Xian nodded affirmatively. Great. That's great. There was a brief moment of silence before the old ancestor of the Zhang clan burst into hearty laughter. Over the years, he had been single-handedly propping the Zhang clan up, and it was extremely tiring for him. He knew that if he passed away, the Zhang clan would swiftly fall into decline, and that was not something that he was willing to see. However, the breakthrough of that saber meant that the Zhang clan had another ancient sage to rely on. Furthermore, the lifespan of an artifact was far longer than a human's. There was no doubt that its existence would ensure the safety of the Zhang clan for a very long time. I still have some students who are in the hands of the 100 schools of philosophers, so I'll be taking my leave. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. With the departure of the ancient sages of the 100 schools of philosophers, an otherworldly demonic tribe, there was nothing else that could pose a threat to them there. Go on. The old ancestor of the Zhang clan waved his hand. If not for the interference of the old ancestor from the Zhang clan, his earlier assault would not have succeeded. In the worst-case scenario, he might have even died to the otherworldly demon ancient sage earlier. Thus, he bowed deeply to the old ancestor of the Zhang clan, before prompting Zhaoye to lead the way ahead. The two of them flew an extremely long distance. And it was not until the Hall of Great Accomplishment was nothing but a blur in the scenery that Zhaoye finally came to a halt. I entered this space with the 100 schools of philosophers from here, Zhaoye said. Taking a look, Zhang Xian realized that this was the place where he and Hu Yaoyao had entered from. It seemed like it was the same for the others as well. Break! Zhang Xian had only managed to arrive in the exteriors of the Hall of Great Accomplishment through the offerings of the otherworldly demonic tribe, which had opened a spatial passageway there. However, with the infernal black saber upgraded to ancient sage tier, he did not have to depend on such elaborate techniques anymore. Voila! With a slash of the infernal black saber, a black rift appeared in midair. Zhang Xian pulled Zhaoye and leaped right into the black rift. The next moment, the two of them returned to the dimension of 4 seasons. However, what that stood before him was no longer a field of snow. Flowers had bloomed amid verdant greenery, replacing the monotonous whiteness from before. If not for the fact that the introspective convalescence realm elder was still in the area, he would have wondered if he had entered another world. Having been in this dimension before, it did not take him too long to find the exit to the world. The duo swiftly dived through the spatial seal to enter the next dimension. Before they knew it, they found themselves standing in the midst of a mountain forest filled with miasma. Zhaoye took a look at the surrounding environment. Wei Ruyan is likely to be in the subordinate hall corresponding to this dimension. Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. He flicked his wrist, and a pill appeared on his palm. Swallow this. All right. Zhaoye popped the pill into her mouth before asking doubtfully, Teacher, is this an antidote? The air and water here are poisonous. Monitor your condition and be careful. Zhang Xian explained. Due to his innate fetal poison, he had devoted a fair portion of his time to studying poison. With a glance, he could tell that the mountain forest was not as simple as it seemed. Despite the silence drifting in the area, there were no formidable beasts that posed a threat. The truth was that the entire area was suffused with lethal poison that would callously suffocate the unwary. Following closely behind her teacher, Zhaoye asked, Teacher, what do we do now? Let's find the exit of this dimension for the time being. If my guess is correct, the location of the subordinate hall should be directly above the exit. Zhang Xian said. Having gone through a couple of dimensions, he was already fairly well versed in the rules. He randomly picked a direction with his Dragonbone Divine Spear, confounding Zhaoye in the process, before trudging off in the chosen direction. There were venomous scorpions and snakes all over the jungle, but as one who possessed the heaven's pathgenshi, Zhang Xian did not fear them. They carried on ahead without facing much danger. After traveling for roughly an hour, they encountered a group of master teachers whose faces had turned frighteningly pale. It was apparent that they had been poisoned. Zhang Xian gave them a couple of pills infused with heaven's pathgenshi to cure them of their poison, following which, he asked them a few questions to determine the approximate location of the exit before rushing over. This should be it. Roughly 2 hours later, the duo finally halted right before a medium-sized pond. This seems to be nothing more than an ordinary pond. Teacher, why do you think that this is the exit? Zhaoye asked doubtfully. She had also heard the answers provided by the group of master teachers, but even they had been oblivious to the true location of the exit. How could her teacher be so certain about the matter? That's simple. Without bothering to explain himself, Zhang Xian swiped his hand through the air and grabbed an ant in between his fingertips. This ant was crimson in color, and it was roughly the size of a bean. After they made their way there, the first thing that Zhang Xian realized was that there were no venomous creatures around the perimeter of the pond. That was more than enough to back up his deduction. Realizing that they were right before the exit, Zhaoye asked, Teacher, should we tear a dimension rift right now to save Ruyan? Based on what her teacher had said, the subordinate hall where Wei Ruyan had been taken to was likely right above the pond. We are going to save her, but before that, there's one more thing that we have to do. Wait here for me while I go into the pond to take a look. The fact that the antidote that neutralizes the poison from the venomous creatures in this dimension can be found within the pond means that the crux to the dimension is likely to be in there as well. We'll have to grab that first. Zhang Xian said. The crux of the forest dimension was the 5 monarchs. In the desert dimension, it was the berserk yellows in wood. In the dimension of 4 seasons, it was the crystal. There was little doubt that something similar could be found in the poison dimension as well. Like the crystal, it was likely to be an artifact that would play a crucial role in whatever they encountered within the subordinate hall. In any case, it was always better to be prepared. After saying those words, Zhang Xian leaped right into the clear pond without any hesitation. With a depth of around 10 meters, the pond was not too deep. Beyond that was where the spatial seal that led to the next dimension lay. Instead of entering the spatial seal, Zhang Xian chose to swim around its vicinity to take a closer look. But even after swimming all the way around once, he was unable to find anything at all. Putting aside any life forms, he could not even find any rocks, ores, or anything that could remotely resemble an artifact. It was all clear water. Did I guess incorrectly? Does the crux of the dimension not lie here? Or could it be that someone has beaten me to it? Zhang Xian frowned. No, that's not right. If someone had claimed the crux of the formation, the poison lingering in the air would have receded by now. In the desert dimension, the desert had vanished after he took the berserk yellows in wood. In the forest dimension, as he had left together with the 5 monarchs, it was not clear what had happened after they departed. Nevertheless, no longer restricted by the authority of the 5 monarchs, it was unlikely for the beasts in the dimension to remain so orderly. The same applied to the poison dimension as well. Considering how poison was still lingering in the air, and the pond still possessed the properties of an antidote, it was likely that the crux of the dimension had not been found. I have insight. Zhang Xian scrutinized every nook and cranny within the pond, and soon, he noticed that something was amiss. The substance that would neutralize the surrounding poison seemed to be growing scarcer and scarcer. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before flying out of the pond. He waited for a few seconds before checking on the pond once more, only to find that the substance had fully regenerated within. Teacher, have you found it yet? Zhao asked. Not yet. However, I have a good guess as to what the crux of the formation is. Bring me a bamboo pole. Zhang Xian instructed with a smile. Zhao left the area. Shortly after, she returned with a bamboo pole in hand. Taking the bamboo pole, Zhang Xian shook it lightly, jolting the leaves off. Driving his junqi through the bamboo pole, he manifested his junqi as a thin thread at the other end of the bamboo pole, before concentrating his junqi at the very tip of the thread, as if preparing a delicious bait for the prey to be reeled in. This is a fishing rod. Teacher, are you intending to fish at this pond? Zhao was taken aback. For visiting. Furthermore, the fish seemed to have quite an eccentric personality. Don't estimate this fellow. It's a sempiternal realm consummation cultivator. Put aside coming onto shore, he wouldn't die even if he was thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Zhang Xian explained. Zhao Ye's initial shock slowly turned into intrigue as she asked. If it possesses such strength, how did it end up being fished up? A sempiternal realm consummation fish was likely to be a being of great intelligence. Yet, it had been fished up by an ordinary bamboo pole. This was unbelievable. I can't help it. It was out of habit. In the past, Kong Shi would often come to fish me. He would hook me up each and every time before releasing me shortly after. Each time, I would be caught dozens of times, so I eventually got used to it. The koi fish explained. Zhao Ye's cheeks continued to twitch. Despite its strength, it still allowed itself to be hooked up each and every single day. Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seemed like it enjoyed the process. Was it really that bored? More importantly, to fish the same fish every single day, Kong Shi must have been bored to death. Don't listen to his nonsense. If I'm not wrong, Kong Shi also used his junqi as his fishing line and bait. What that fellow is interested in is not just the bait, but the fishing line as well. Am I right? Zhang Xian shook his head with a light chuckle before turning his gaze to the koi fish. It's all fleeting clouds. The koi fish said in embarrassment. I see. Zhao Ye widened her eyes in realization. It was no wonder an ordinary fish was able to cultivate to sempiternal realm consummation. It turned out that it had been consuming Kong Shi's junqi all along. Naturally, there was no way that it would pass on such a delightful task to any other fish. I thought that I'd hidden myself quite well earlier. How did you find me? Asked the koi fish doubtfully as it turned to Zhang Xian. The way that it had hidden itself was extremely discreet, such that it would have been nigh impossible for even those who possessed the eye of insight to see through its disguise. There were a few other groups who had arrived prior to them, but they had failed to notice its presence. Yet, the young man had actually known that he needed to use a fishing rod to hook it up, and that had left it feeling itchy all over. As a result, it could not help but bite the bait and allow itself to be hooked up. The antidote that you have left inside the water is similar to my jinshi. It's not something that anyone could create, Zhang Xian explained. If I'm not mistaken, it probably originated from Kong Shi, right? The full saying is that Kong Zi fishes with a rod and not with a net. He hunts not those who have returned to their nests. It displays his compassion toward the world. It's fine to fish for food, but one should restrain from overfishing. At the same time, it's immoral to hunt animals down in their safe haven and resting spot. This analogy can be used to draw parallels to many more circumstances. The reason that he had allowed a venomous creature to inject its toxins into his body was to prove his deduction to Zhaoya, as well as to feel how the antidote within the pond neutralized the toxins of the venomous creatures. He had swiftly realized that the antidote worked in a similar manner to his Heaven's Path Jinshi. Other than Kong Shi, he could not think of anyone else who possessed such an ability. That was also why he had thought of making a fishing rod with his own jinshi. To be honest, he had not really been sure whether it would work out or not. It's indeed Kong Shi's unique jinshi, but why do you possess the same ability as him? The koi fish asked questioningly. It's because I'm a celestial master teacher as well. Zhang Xian answered with a chuckle. You are a celestial master teacher? That explains a lot. The koi fish widened its eyes in realization. All right, I have made up my mind. I'm going to be with you from now on. Back then, Kong Shi instructed me to stay here, saying that I should only leave when the next celestial master teacher comes by. That way, I'll be able to be fished every day. Fished every day. Zhang Xian recoiled in disgust. That koi fish sure was a masochist, wanting to be caught every day. You should enter my folded space for the time being. I'll call you when I need you, Zhang Xian said with a wave of his hand. Roger that. The koi fish replied excitedly. The next moment, it entered Zhang Xian's myriad ant-hive nest, and found a massive brick lying before it. Whoa, this brick is forged so exquisitely, the koi fish complimented. It had seen quite a few bricks in its lifetime, but it had never seen one with so many good materials wasted on it. You are the one that is a brick. Your whole family are bricks. I am the Golden Origin Cauldron, a true cauldron through and through. The Golden Origin Cauldron roared in fury. You are a cauldron? The koi fish scoffed in disdain. So, you should be able to light up a fire, right? Why don't you come grill me then? People have told me that I taste wonderful grilled. Don't you want to try a slice of me? Quick, I can't hold myself back anymore. The Golden Origin Cauldron. There's no need to go through that much trouble. Raw slices are good enough. The infernal black saber harumphed coldly as a cold glint flashed off its blade. Ah, I'm sorry. Horrified by the appearance of an ancient sage artifact, the koi fish immediately lowered its head subserviently, not daring to run its mouth anymore. Unaware of the little drama that had just happened within the myriad ant-hive nest, Zhang Xian brought Zhaoya to the area above the pond. Just like before, he was unable to advance any further upon reaching an altitude of 30 meters. Thus, he whipped out the infernal black saber and sliced the air above him. Voila! Space was torn apart, and a dimension rift emerged in its place. The duo continued heading upward, and it did not take long for them to arrive on flat ground. Similar to before, a massive palace could be seen right in front of them in the distance. This should be the subordinate hall, Zhang Xian said. Let's head over. So the two of them swiftly made their way forward. This is the for visiting. Kong Shi truly saw past the facade of power and wealth, Zhang Xian remarked as he examined the room carefully. Similar to the poison dimension, the layout of everything in the room felt perfectly natural. It was an environment that stripped a person of their worries and frustrations, leaving them refreshed and invigorated. Cultivating in such an environment would surely be highly beneficial to raising one's soul depth. Since the gates have already opened, Wei Ruyan and the others should have already entered this subordinate hall. Where are they? Zhaoye scanned her surroundings doubtfully as well. The entire room was visible with a glance. There was nowhere for one to hide. It was apparent that they were the only two people in that room. This did not make sense. There should have been quite a number of people there. Boom, boom, boom. Just as they were perplexed by this bizarre situation, they suddenly felt a disturbance in the spiritual energy ahead. They should be right there, Zhang Xian said. Tracing where the disturbance was coming from, Zhang Xian hurried ahead and left the room through the back door in front of them. The moment they walked out, a gush of concentrated jinqi suddenly washed over them, exerting immense pressure on them. Beyond the back door of the Hall of Lull was a garden. We have already reserved the Bodhi fruits on the tree. I'll have to ask you to return from where you came. A voice harumphed coldly. There's no one in the world who doesn't desire treasures. But these are things that we have put a great deal of effort into obtaining. We can't give them to you. The treasures of the world go to those who are capable enough to acquire them. We are the ones who made sufficient preparations to acquire them. So it goes without saying that they belong to us. From where the voices were soundings from, Zhang Xian could see two factions standing opposite one another, the air between them a little tense. The group on the right side consisted of 10 members, and Wei Ruyan was among them as well. The other 9 were dressed in identical clothes, which indicated their identity as offspring of the 100 schools of philosophers. On the other hand, the group on the left side only consisted of a single person. A round orb twirled with a light hum in front of her. Dimension silencer. The person was actually Luo Qiqi. Upon the entrance of Zhang Xian and Zhaoye, the crowd swiftly turned their eyes over to take a look at the two new guests. Zhang Shi. Luo Qiqi's eyes lit up with a hint of anticipation. Zhang Xian directed a nod at Luo Qiqi, before turning his gaze to the 100 schools of philosophers. Among them, only Wei Ruyan paid no attention to his arrival. She was in a trance, just like Zhaoye before. Her hands were directed toward the Bodhi tree, which was located not too far away from her, and the fruits were gradually becoming more and more crimson under the influx of her jinqi. It seemed as if the fruits would mature at any moment. This isn't an ordinary Bodhi tree, it's great sage tier. Noticing Zhang Xian's doubt, Luo Qiqi hurried over. Unlike the one in the Hongyuan Empire, consuming the Bodhi fruits growing on it increases the chances of a cultivator reaching a soul depth of 30, 0 by 30%, thus reaching the level equivalent to an ancient sage. It allows one's soul depth to reach 30, 0. Zhang Xian was startled for a moment as his eyes widened in shock. It was a common saying among master teachers that soul depth was the hardest to cultivate, and that was something that he could relate deeply with. Be it his jinqi, physical body, or soul cultivation, as long as he had the corresponding cultivation techniques, he would be able to advance with ease. However, he could not do the same with his state of mind. It had already been a few days, but he had only managed to raise his soul depth from 28, 1 to 29, 99. He was still lacking a bit to reaching 30, 0. It might have appeared to be a simple 0, 0, 1, but this final step happened to be the greatest hurdle to overcome. Who knew how much time and effort would be required to overcome this challenge? If the Bodhi fruit really could raise one's soul depth to 30, 0, one's chances of achieving a breakthrough to ancient sage would really be raised significantly. I translated it as Hall of Lull for standardization purposes, but the word in the context of manors and palaces in the ancient era referred to the bedroom of the owner. That's right. If not for that, there's no way they would have gone through the trouble of bringing Wei Ruyan here. Luo Qiqi replied. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes deeply. He really had to say that the 100 schools of philosophers had a far deeper understanding of the Temple of Confucius than the Master-Teacher Pavilion. First, it was the canvas of 4 seasons imbued with lingering aeon of ancient sages. And then, it was a Bodhi fruit that allowed one's soul depth to hit 30, reaching a level comparable to an ancient sage. It seemed like they had already studied the entire Temple of Confucius thoroughly, and had made elaborate preparations for that very moment. Hung long, under Wei Ruyan's relentless infusion of jinqi, the Bodhi fruits on the tree began to sway a little, emanating a deep fragrance. This was a sign that the fruits had matured. Wei Ruyan finally halted her flow of jinqi. It was clear that she had overexerted herself, trying to hasten the maturity of the Bodhi fruits. Her face was slightly pale, and she was panting heavily. Wei Ruyan. Zhaoye anxiously sent a telepathic message over. Senior Zhaoye? Wei Ruyan was beginning to recover from the trance that she was in. With a dazed look on her face, she scanned her surroundings in search of a familiar face. She swiftly found Zhaoye, and at the same time, she also noticed the young man standing next to her. Her eyes slowly widened in astonishment as she softly muttered in disbelief. Teacher. Seeing that Wei Ruyan was unharmed, and that her cultivation had risen a little, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Teacher. Realizing that it was not her imagination, Wei Ruyan immediately rushed over to Zhang Xian and Zhaoye's side. However, barely after taking a few steps, a young man suddenly stepped forward and blocked her way. You can't go over yet. You need to pick the Bodhi fruits for us first, the young man said. The irritated Wei Ruyan coldly hissed. Get lost. Don't forget what you promised us. The young man's face darkened as he reminded haughtily. You dare to threaten me? Wei Ruyan narrowed her eyes in fury as an imposing aura emanated from her body. She was ready to let all hell break loose if pushed too far. However, before she could make a move, the voice of her teacher sounded in the air. My student has helped you hasten the maturity of the Bodhi fruits, but you still need her help to pick them for you? Ruyan, come here. Completely disregarding the 100 schools of philosophers, Zhang Xian turned to Wei Ruyan and urged her to come over. Yes, teacher. Wei Ruyan swiftly walked around the young man to go to Zhang Xian's side. You are Wei Ruyan's teacher, Zhang Xian? The young man frowned in displeasure. I am. Zhang Xian replied curtly. You came at a good time. Since Wei Ruyan follows your orders, I need you to order her to harvest the Bodhi fruits. Of the 6 fruits here, we can give you one as a reward for your hard work. The young man said haughtily. As if doubting what he had just heard, Zhang Xian asked incredulously. Did you say that you'll only give 1 Bodhi fruit to Ruyan in exchange for her hard work? That's right. The young man nodded. Our 100 schools of philosophers requires the remaining 5 Bodhi fruits, so we have to bring them back with us. The only reason that we are willing to spare a Bodhi fruit to you is in view of the hard work that she has put in all this time. If you don't want the Bodhi fruit, you can choose something else equivalent in value. Spare. Seeing the young man putting on airs, Zhang Xian shook his head wryly. Since you know that Ruyan has put in plenty of hard work, allow me to speak a few words of fairness. Feel free. You were able to enter this subordinate hall due to Ruyan's unique constitution, right? That's right. The Bodhi fruits are mature and ready for picking, because Ruyan has been using her jinqi to stimulate its growth, right? That's right. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Then it's really simple then. Since you have done nothing at all 6 Bodhi fruits should go to Ruyan. What's there to fight about? Alright Ruyan, go and pluck all of the fruits. Zhang Xian remarked earnestly. What do you mean by that? Not expecting Zhang Xian to snub them in such a manner, the young man widened his eyes in fury. I don't mean anything by that. I'm just speaking a few words of fairness, Zhang Xian said. Since you played no part in entering the subordinate hall and maturing the Bodhi fruits, what right do you have to claim possession of the Bodhi fruits? Audacious. Do you know who you are talking to? The young man roared furiously, angered by Zhang Xian's impudence. Walala! The remaining 8 from the 100 schools of philosophers quickly surrounded the 3 of them and released their auras, attempting to pressure them into submission. Just like the group from the Hall of Great Accomplishment, they were all sempiternal realm consummation experts. Teacher. Wei Ruiyan's complexion turned ugly upon seeing that someone dared to threaten her teacher. But just as she was about to say something, her teacher raised his hand and said, "Don't worry, leave it to me." "Yes, teacher." Wei Ruiyan nodded. She knew her teacher capability very well. Since her teacher had told her not to worry, it really meant that there was nothing for her to worry about. Zhang Xian glanced at the youths surrounding him, and a wry smile crept onto his face. He took a step forward. These youths from the 100 schools of philosophers were indeed formidable, but the infernal black saber had just advanced to ancient sage tier, and he had many artifacts and tamed beasts with him. If he wanted to, he could easily subdue all of them. Just as he was about to make a move to teach those arrogant fellows a lesson, Luo Qiqi suddenly spoke. "Allow me to do it instead." Without waiting for Zhang Xian's response, she dived into the crowd. As soon as she made her move, the incredible strength that she wielded immediately showed. Just like Zhaoye, she had actually reached sempiternal realm consummation. Zhang Xian felt his head hurt a little. Previously, when he unintentionally wreaked havoc at the Luo clan and left, she had only been at St. Nine Dan. Yet, within such a short period of time, she had actually managed to advance her cultivation all the way up to sempiternal realm consummation. The rate at which she was achieving breakthroughs was ridiculous. Everyone around him told him that he cultivated extremely quickly, but whenever he looked at his students, he felt like he still had a long way to go. Wung wung wung. The dimension silencer rotated with a light hum in the air, keeping the surrounding space tightly sealed. Luo Qiqi flitted around the crowd, as if a butterfly amid a field of flowers. There was no doubt that the youths from the 100 schools of philosophers were powerful, but it was painfully obvious that they were no match for Luo Qiqi. It seems like her grasp over the dimension silencer has improved. Zhang Xian nodded in approval. He had seen the young lady using the dimension silencer to halt the elders of the Luo clan before. Back then, her control over the dimension silencer's powers had still been a little unrefined, and it had felt like she was only tapping into its raw strength. However, at this moment, her control felt wholesome, to the point that her movements almost felt like an art form in itself. In this moment, it was no exaggeration to say that she had become one with the dimension silencer. Luo Qiqi won't lose to them. Let's harvest the fruits, Zhang Xian said with a smile as he turned his sights to the Bodhi tree. The Bodhi tree before him was a little similar to the one that he had seen at the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. However, it was far lusher, and the aura that it emanated felt significantly deeper. They say that cultivating under the Bodhi tree can enhance one's soul cultivation and state of mind. Zhang Xian thought excitedly. Ordinary Saint Realm Bodhi trees had the effect of calming a person's mind and dispelling their inner demons. Considering that the Bodhi tree before him had reached great sage, its effects were likely to be more pronounced. If I cultivate under this tree, perhaps I might be able to advance my state of mind beyond 30. 0. His state of mind had already reached 29. 99. A sliver away from reaching the level of the ancient sages. It would be a huge waste for him to ingest the Bodhi fruit only to advance his soul depth by 0.01. As long as he sat beneath the tree and meditated, he should be able to make a breakthrough soon enough. While Zhang Xian was pondering over that matter, Wei Ruiyan walked up to the Bodhi tree and reached out to grab one of the Bodhi fruits. Wang! A pulsation of energy burst forth from the Bodhi fruit. It was a natural defensive mechanism of the Bodhi tree, in order to keep those who intended to harvest its fruits. However, the pulsated energy was easily neutralized by Wei Ruiyan using a secret art. Kacha! The fruit was plucked from the branches. Tzizi! The moment that the fruit was harvested, black smoke gushed forth from the branch that the fruit had been snapped from, and it swiftly shrouded Wei Ruiyan. That's poisonous gas? Zhang Xian was taken aback. He did not expect the Bodhi tree to have such a defensive mechanism as well. It was no wonder those youths had been unwilling to pick the fruits themselves, insisting that Wei Ruyan do it. If they had really tried to do it by themselves, there was a good chance that they would have ended up being poisoned to death. The poisonous gas released by the Bodhi tree would have been extremely tricky to resolve for any other cultivator, but to Wei Ruyan, it was no different from tonic. As she absorbed all of it into her body, an excited gleam flickered across her beady eyes. You can raise your cultivation through the black smoke too? Zhang Xian was taken aback. Wei Ruyan nodded. As expected of the innate poison body, Zhang Xian remarked in awe. This unique constitution sure was powerful. If others were afflicted with that poison, they would die within moments. Yet, Wei Ruyan was actually able to make use of this deadly material to raise her cultivation. Even Zhang Xian could not help but envy that overpowered ability of hers. It did not take long for Wei Ruyan to finish assimilating the energy within the black smoke. She quickly retrieved a jade container from her storage ring and placed the Bodhi fruit inside. Once that was done, she moved on to the next Bodhi fruit and repeated the process. The same black smoke poured forth and shrouded Wei Ruyan. This time around, however, it seemed to be significantly denser than before. Under its onslaught, the young lady shuddered a little, and her face turned pale. What's wrong? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. The poisonous gas is too powerful. There's only so much that I'm able to absorb, Wei Ruyan replied frankly. Even as one who possessed the innate poison body, the amount of poison that she could take in and assimilate at once was limited. If she attempted to take in too much poison, she risked overloading her body with power. The poisonous gas released by the second Bodhi fruit was far greater than the first fruit, and this was something that she had not expected. It took a long while before she finally managed to curb the rampaging poisonous gas within her body, and she heaved a sigh of relief. Then she turned her sights to the third Bodhi fruit. Tizzy. This time, the black smoke released by the Bodhi tree was even greater than before. Forced to assimilate so much poisonous gas at once, Wei Ruyan's body began shuddering uncontrollably, and her face gradually turned paler and paler. Just as she was about to reach her limits, she felt someone placing his palm against her back, following which her teacher said, "Use the black smoke to push for a breakthrough." "Yes, teacher." Knowing that her teacher was intending to help her raise her cultivation, Wei Ruyan quickly focused her concentration on channeling the poisonous gas toward overcoming her bottleneck. The poisonous gas emanated by the Bodhi tree was lethal, but it was an exceptionally powerful catalyst to temper one's state of mind. Zhang Xian used his Heaven's Path Zhenqi to help clear the various blockages within Wei Ruyan's body, so that she could circulate her Zhenqi easier. With every Bodhi fruit that Wei Ruyan picked, the poisonous gas emanated by the Bodhi tree would grow significantly stronger. By the time she came to the sixth fruit, the poisonous gas emanated was so powerful that it seemed as if it would corrode even the surrounding space. Zhang Xian meticulously facilitated Wei Ruyan's flow of energy in order to ensure smoothness in driving her Zhenqi. Jai, Jai. Sometime later, sounds echoed from Wei Ruyan's meridians. It was a sign that showed that she had successfully cleared the bottlenecks in her way. Her aura surged, and before long, her cultivation had already reached sempiternal realm consummation, just like Xiaoya. After reinforcing the overwhelming power coursing through her body, Wei Ruyan clasped her fist and bowed in agitation. "Thank you, teacher." If not for her teacher's help, she would have wasted a good half of the poisonous gas there. If things had gone wrong, she might have sustained heavy injuries because her body was unable to withstand the stress imposed on it. With her sempiternal realm consummation cultivation and her overpowered innate poison body, it was unlikely that she would find anyone who was a match for her beneath ancient sage. The heartened Zhang Xian nodded in approval. Then, his face visibly turned cold as he turned his gaze toward the 9 youths battling with Luo Qiqi. If not for the fact that he was around, Wei Ruyan would have sustained irreparable damage from the growing intensity of poisonous gas emanated from the Bodhi tree. This kind of harm was not something that a mere Bodhi fruit could compensate for. These fellows expected Wei Ruyan to harvest the fruits for them, but they did not take any preventive measures in order to protect her. It was apparent that they saw her as no more than a tool that they could dispose of after squeezing her dry. Pung pung pung. At that moment, the battle between Luo Qiqi and the 9 youths from the 100 schools of philosophers finally came to an end. The fighting prowess exerted by Luo Qiqi, with the dimension silencer, was simply too powerful. Even with the 8 of them collaborating with one another, they did not stand a chance. Their faces were pale from the injuries that they had sustained in the battle, and their complexions looked incredibly awful. The fact that they had been chosen to enter the subordinate hall to seek the Bodhi fruit meant that their standing in the 100 schools of philosopher was considerably high. They had grown up basking in the respect of those around them, but they had ended up being so viciously pummeled during such an important mission. This was not something that their pride could accept. Zhang Xian and Wei Ruyan, those fruits are of the utmost importance to the 100 schools of philosophers. I hope that you can hand them over. The young man who seemed to be the de facto leader of the group said through gritted teeth. However, in response to the request from the young man, Zhang Xian simply waved his hand and said, "Break their limbs and throw them out." Whether they did it intentionally or not, he could not accept the fact that they had placed his precious student in such a dangerous position. They had to suffer the consequences of their actions. Sure thing. The golden origin cauldron leaped out and charged toward the 9 young men. Soon enough, their limbs were all fractured by the golden origin cauldron before they were tossed pathetically out of the Hall of Lull. None of them would have feared the golden origin cauldron at their peak, but after Luo Qiqi's attacks, they no longer wielded the strength to retaliate. "Teacher, I'll leave these Bodhi fruits for you to decide what to do with them," Wei Ruyan said as she passed the fruits over. Zhang Xian took the Bodhi fruits and placed all of them, but one into his storage ring. He passed the Bodhi fruit over to Wei Ruyan and said, "You're the one who collected so many Bodhi fruits, so you should hold on to one. However, don't rush into using it. I have a formula here that can raise your soul depth. I want you to cultivate under the Bodhi tree and raise your soul depth to 29. 9 first. Once you're done, you can use the Bodhi fruit and push for a breakthrough to ancient sage." "Yes," Wei Ruyan nodded. With a tap of his finger, Zhang Xian imparted the secret art to temper one's state of mind over to Wei Ruyan. "Zhaoya, this one is for you." Zhang Xian took out another Bodhi fruit and passed it to Zhaoya together with the secret art. Due to their unique constitutions, they were able to advance their Zhenqi cultivation swiftly. However, this had also led to the cultivation of their minds severely lagging behind. This would be a good opportunity for them to cover the gap. "Qiqi, this one is for you." After sorting his 2 students out, Zhang Xian took out another Bodhi fruit and passed it over to Luo Qiqi. Luo Qiqi had arrived in the Hall of Lull earlier than them. Even if he did not come, with her fighting prowess alone, she was bound to have been able to obtain one for herself. "Thank you." Luo Qiqi took the fruit, but her eyes remained firmly upon Zhang Xian. There was a conflicted look in her eyes as she said, "Zhang sure." Seemingly knowing what she was going to say, Zhang Xian waved his hand and said, "I have taught you pill forging before," which affirmed our relationship as teacher and student. It's impossible to dictate one's feelings, but propriety is not something that can simply be disregarded. It's impossible for us to come to be. In the first place, the engagement between us was a huge misunderstanding. I believe that you are aware that there's someone whom I love as well, so I'm sorry. Since it was impossible for him to give her happiness, it would be better for him to break it off decisively. Dragging it out would only cause more harm to the other party. He did not want the other party to spend her life pursuing something futile. Luo Qiqi's face collapsed as her body trembled in agitation. She knew that the odds were in her favor, and she knew that it would be nigh impossible to achieve what she desired. Nevertheless, she had not thought that she would be rejected so bluntly. By the side, Zhaoya's face also darkened upon hearing those words. As the saying went, "A day as my teacher, a father I'll respect for life." A student was not allowed to have any other relationships with their teacher, or else it would be considered a breach of propriety. Such a thing was frowned upon in the master-teacher continent. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. She wanted to pursue her happiness, too. But she knew that her attempts to do so would only sully her teacher's reputation. This was a dilemma that had left her deeply conflicted. Noting the depressed look on Luo Qiqi and Zhao Ye's faces, Zhang Xian sighed deeply internally as he smiled. All right. For the time being, you should focus on raising your cultivation. You are still young, and there is much more to life that you haven't seen or experienced yet. One day, you'll find someone far more suitable for you than me. If there were any alternatives, he would not have wanted to hurt the two of them. However, if he failed to maintain a firm attitude toward this matter, he would only give them false hope. And there was nothing more painful than pursuing something that would never come to be. Knowing that they needed some time to themselves in order to calm down, Zhang Xian waved his hand and said, I'll leave you all here to cultivate. Try your best to raise your soul depth as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, I'll go look for Yuan Tao. Just as he was about to leave, a voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Master, I can dig up this tree for you. Do you want to take it away with you? You are able to dig this tree up? Zhang Xian was taken aback. I am the crux of an entire dimension, you know. Of course I am able to dig up a mere tree. The koi fish replied proudly. Is that so? Let's take it away then. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. That whole time, he had been thinking that it would be wonderful if he could take the Bodhi tree away with him. After all, this was an ideal impetus for him to push for a breakthrough in his soul depth to 30. Who would have thought that the little koi fish would be able to do it for him? But after giving it some more thought, the matter made sense. The koi fish was the crux to the poison dimension, and the poison dimension corresponded to the Hall of Lull. It was likely that there was some inseverable connection between the two. There had to be some reason for Kong Shi choosing to groom the koi fish and leave it in the poison dimension in the first place. All right. Hearing Zhang Xian's approval, the koi fish immediately flew out, and with whip of its tail, it leaped into the pond located at the center of the backyard. Gugugugu. The water in the pond began to swirl into a massive spiral. Gradually, the water spiral rose into the air and enveloped the Bodhi tree, pulling it off the surface of the ground. Zhang Xian did not think that it would be so easy to retrieve this precious Bodhi tree. His eyes lit up in excitement. Hula! He swiftly stowed the Bodhi tree into the myriad ant-hive nest, choosing an empty clearing in the area to plant it. Shortly after it was planted, a pond formed in its vicinity, and koi fishes swam delightfully within it, splashing water into the air from time to time. Zhang Xian quickly examined the replanted Bodhi tree and noted that it did not wither due to the movement. Instead, its trees grew even lusher. Furthermore, it seemed to harmonize with the other Bodhi tree that he had acquired from the Hongyuan royal family, and they swiftly fused together into one body, forming a passageway that could temper one's soul and soul depth. With this, I shouldn't face any troubles trying to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage. Zhang Xian chuckled softly beneath his breath. With this tree placed in the myriad ant-hive nest, he would be able to cultivate whenever he had time. Reaching a soul depth of 30 was simply a matter of time. Of course, the fastest way was still to consume a Bodhi fruit. However, even though his soul depth was already on the verge of a breakthrough, his cultivation was severely lacking. He felt that the Bodhi fruit would be put to greater use with his parents and the others. Teacher. Seeing that the Bodhi tree had been taken away, Zhao Ye and the others were slightly bewildered. It was just a moment ago that their teacher had prompted them to cultivate under the Bodhi tree, but the next moment, he had suddenly taken it away. In response, Zhang Xian cleared his throat and said, You should head into my folded space to cultivate. Since he had taken the Bodhi tree away, there was no reason for them to remain in the area. Thus, he waved his hand and helped the three girls into the myriad ant-hive nest as well, leaving them to cultivate their soul depth. Then, he quickly made his way out of the Hall of Lull. Ho! Thrown out of the Hall of Lull with their limbs broken, the 9 youths from the 100 schools of philosophers trembled in fury. Frenzied looks covered their faces, and it seemed as if they were on the verge of going berserk. After consuming a grade 9 grand intermittence pill, their shattered bones had already begun to heal, but their rage only deepened with time. Unable to take it any longer, one of the youths asked, "Gong Shiqing, what do we do now?" The young man named Gong Shiqing was the de facto leader of the group, the person who had given orders to Wei Ruyan and Zhang Xian earlier. He was a descendant of ancient sage Zihua. "We can't let this matter go just like that." Gong Shiqing gritted his teeth furiously. As offspring of the 100 schools of philosophers, the populace of the master-teacher continent were no different from barbarians in their eyes. In the first place, those barbarians should have taken pride in the fact that they were of use to them in the temple of Confucius. Yet, not only did they snatch all of the treasures away, they had even pummeled them into such a state. It was a heinous crime, unforgivable. We have to teach them a lesson so that they'll know never to cross the 100 schools of philosophers. Zhang Xian doesn't seem too strong, but that young lady known as Luo Qiqi is far beyond our means to deal with at the moment. Zhao Ye and Wei Ruyan's cultivation has reached sempiternal realm consummation as well. We wouldn't stand a chance against them in a fight. The others discussed the situation worriedly. They were infuriated, but they also knew that their opponents were beyond their means to deal with. We might not be a match for them, but the loss of the Bodhi fruits is a huge matter. The old ancestor will surely intervene. I'll send him a message right now. Gong Shiqing harumphed coldly, bearing the excruciating pain from his newly healed bones. Gong Shiqing took out a unique jade token and sent the details of the conflict over. However, he did not go in depths about who the culprit was. He only mentioned that the Bodhi fruits had been stolen and that they had sustained severe injuries. A moment after he sent the message, tremendous pressure suddenly weighed down from the heavens. It was so intense that it left the crowd feeling deeply suffocated, following which, an elderly figure suddenly appeared before the crowd. Upon seeing the states of the 9 youths, the face of the elderly figure turned livid as he demanded, "What happened?" As he spoke, a droplet of blood oozed out from the tip of his finger. The droplet of blood split into 9 portions, with each portion entering the body of one of the 9 youths. I hope that you can offer a fair explanation as to why you have treated my descendants in such a manner. Otherwise, don't blame me for being merciless. Who? A wind blew silently in the area, but there was no response at all. From the looks of it, it doesn't seem like he's the offspring of any ancient sage. Since he isn't under anyone's protection, I won't stand on ceremony. The elderly figure harumphed coldly as a malicious aura drifted forth from his body. At this moment, the descendants behind the elderly figure suddenly exclaimed in agitation, "Old ancestor, that fellow is coming out." Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Shortly after, a slight glow emanated from the entrance of the Hall of Lull, and a figure appeared before the crowd. We must make him understand that those from the 100 schools of philosophers aren't to be trifled with. Gong Shiqing sneered coldly. However, the very next moment, he saw the old ancestor's body stiffening as an incredulous expression crept onto the latter's face. "The person whom you were referring, the person who stole the Bodhi fruit from you, is Zhang Xian?" "That's right. He's the scoundrel who made a move on us." Gong Shiqing nodded vehemently. "I see. I forgot that I had some matters that I still have to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave. A matter as trivial as this doesn't require my intervention, so settle it among yourselves." "Who?" And with a poof, the old ancestor disappeared from sight. Gong Shiqing. The crowd. Just like the group of sword practitioners I encountered at the Sword Lagoon, these fellows are unknowingly losing their sanity. Zhang Xian shook his head lamentably. He had encountered such a situation back in the Qianqiong Empire. The sword practitioners there had come to blows as soon as they had a disagreement with one another, which was atypical of sword practitioners. He did not think that he would see the same sight here as well. The battle ended as quickly as it started. Before long, a man stood victorious over the others. See, the sequence that I have followed is the most powerful of all. This should be enough to show that I'm right. All right, hurry up and start making your offerings. The victorious master teacher nodded in contentment. All right, we'll follow your sequence then. The others reluctantly nodded in agreement. Making your offerings? On the other hand, Zhang Xian was confused as to what was going on. The more he looked at the situation, the more bewildering he found it. Master teachers were supposed not to be superstitious. Why were they talking about making their offerings? Hiding by the corner, Zhang Xian continued watching the movements of the master teachers in bewilderment. The victorious master teacher took out a couple of valuable artifacts and placed them before the boulder, as if making an offering to it. Not too long later, the artifacts began to burn up, and a golden glow shone from the boulder. Following which, a silhouette suddenly surfaced on the boulder and began moving around, seemingly demonstrating some sort of battle technique. The secret art that the master teachers were practicing earlier is just the form. So is this the Jinqi circulation pathway that goes along with the movements? Zhang Xian wondered. The silhouette moving on the boulder was currently demonstrating a kind of internal breathing technique that seemed to go along with the movements that the master teachers had executed earlier. But there were still some imperfections between the two. How is this still not right? The sequence I deduced doesn't link up with the internal breathing technique. Pooh! The triumphant master teacher followed the movements of the silhouette on the boulder, but a moment later, his face paled, and a mouthful of blood spurted from his lips. If the movements were at odds with the internal breathing, there was a high chance that one's cultivation might go berserk. He had been extremely confident with the sequence that he had deduced, but who would have thought that it was still wrong? Let's continue studying the movements. We can't afford to make a mistake anymore, or else we'll be trapped here for good. The triumphant master teacher shook his head helplessly. He was just about to continue examining the boulders around the area, when a young man suddenly flew over and said, "Hello, I have arrived in this dimension just a moment ago. If I may ask, what are you all doing?" Any cultivation technique filtered through the library of Heaven's path would eventually end up in its most perfect form. Since the secret art practiced by the silhouette was flawed, it went without saying that the silhouette would be delighted to have him correcting the flaws for it. Not only did he find the right sequence, he even corrected the mistakes made by the predecessors. In this moment, Musu and the others found themselves so suffocated that they could not say a word at all. Just what kind of monster had they encountered? Proceeding ahead in the subordinate hall, it did not take long before they arrived in a massive square. There was a huge crowd gathered in the area. It was likely that they had entered there from the stone forest dimension, just like Musu. However, as they did not have the celestial amulet of legacy, they could not enter the subordinate hall, and had no choice but to remain outside. Murals were inscribed on the walls of the subordinate hall, detailing countless formidable techniques. The crowd was studying them intently, completely absorbed in them. Back in the stone forest dimension, they could only deduce the sequence and hope that what they had deduced was right. However, at that moment, the correct sequence was shown to them through the murals on the walls. This was similar to a diligent student being shown the answer sheet after going through a difficult examination. It went without saying that they would have to internalize everything on the answer sheet so that they could do better next time around. Find authorized novels in Webnovel Faster Updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. Zhang Xian quickly took all of those murals into the Library of Heaven's Path with a swift glance before turning his gaze to the entrance of the subordinate hall. The plaque above the subordinate hall displayed the words Hall of Divine Crusade. Those words carried an imposing presence, weighing in the hearts of those gazing upon them. The massive gates at the entrance were open, and access was only restricted by the invisible barrier shrouding the subordinate hall. Most likely, someone had already entered it. Let me go in to take a look. With a wave of his hand, Zhang Xian took out the little amulet and began making his way in. Unlike the crowd gathered outside, he passed right through the barrier and entered the subordinate hall without any problems. So, before Zhang Xian could properly land his footing into the Hall of Divine Crusade, he suddenly felt 2 surges of sword chi surging right toward his heart. His face immediately darkened as he halted his footsteps. With an agile sidestep, he narrowly dodged the 2 surges of sword chi. Gazing forward, he saw 2 young men standing in front of him with a sword in their hands. Intense killing intent could be felt from the depths of their eyes, leaving the blood of others running cold. These 2 young men were dressed in master-teacher robes. From the exterior, they seemed no different from other master teachers. However, the sheer intensity of their killing intent left one feeling, as if one would be dragged down into the netherworld. Otherworldly demons? Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed in alarm. He did not think that he would actually encounter otherworldly demons in there. Since that was the case, it meant that they had managed to lay their hands upon the celestial amulet of legacy, corresponding to the Hall of Divine Crusade. There were 6 known celestial amulets of legacy in the world. One of them was with the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, one was with the Zhang clan, and one was with the Luo clan. As for the rest, their whereabouts were a complete mystery. Judging by the current situation, the Zhang clan's amulet corresponded to the Hall of Great Accomplishment, and it was likely that the Luo clan's amulet corresponded to the Hall of Lull. Otherwise, Luo Qiqi would not have been able to get into that subordinate hall. Since there were otherworldly demons there, it was likely that one of the celestial amulets of legacy had fallen into their hands. Voila! However, it did not seem like the 2 otherworldly demons were about to give him any more time to ponder about this matter. They flicked their wrists and sent a barrage of sword chi over, not allowing them to rest for a breather at all. It was as if a roaring river was charging right at him, threatening to sweep him away with its force. These 2 otherworldly demons were actually sempiternal realm consummation experts. Humph! Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. With a flick of his wrist, he whipped out the Dragonbone Divine Spear and pierced it toward one of the 2 otherworldly demons. At the same time, he brought out the Golden Origin Cauldron along with his other artifacts and sent them toward the other otherworldly demon. A few breaths later, the 2 sempiternal realm consummation otherworldly demons were killed on the spot. Even without resorting to the 5 monarchs, the seedling and the koi fish, Zhang Xian was still able to subdue the 2 otherworldly demons with ease. He hurled their corpses into his storage ring before proceeding deeper in. What appeared before his eyes was a stately hall. Its walls were filled with paintings that emanated a warm glow. As soon as he stepped into the hall, he found a powerful pressure pressing down on him. Had his soul energy been weak, it would have been hard for him to take even a single step forward. This is a good place to temper one's soul, Zhang Xian thought as he strolled leisurely around the hall. The Hall of Great Accomplishment contained the Aeon of Ancient Sage, the energy required for one to achieve a breakthrough to Ancient Sage. The Hall of Lull contained a treasure that raised one's soul depth. Clearly, the Hall of Divine Crusade was a place for one to temper one's soul, thus strengthening one's soul energy and soul span. Wandering around the room, Zhang Xian did not find anyone else around, and a frown emerged between his brows. It was clear that the 2 otherworldly demons were serving as sentries to ward off any possible intruders from interfering in their business. As such, it was certain that there were more otherworldly demons doing something within the subordinate hall, perhaps scouring for the ultimate treasure there. But why was there no one in sight? Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. What's in this hall? Zhang Xian asked Little Amulet telepathically. Little Amulet had its memories sealed, and they would only awaken when it came to the areas corresponding to each memory. It was likely that it would know what was inside the Hall of Divine Crusade. The greatest treasure in the Hall of Divine Crusade is the Stone of Divine Crusade left behind by Kong Shi. It contains the lingering will of Kong Shi, and it's extremely effective in strengthening one's soul. Little Amulet explained based on the memories it had awakened. Stone of Divine Crusade? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up upon hearing those words. Where is it? His soul cultivation had come to a halt after reaching Aureate Body Realm consummation. If he could find the Stone of Divine Crusade, he might be able to push his soul cultivation a step further, perhaps even achieving a breakthrough to the intuitive impulse realm. It's located right behind the subordinate hall. You'll be able to see it after passing through that door. Little Amulet said as it wiggled its body to point out a direction. All right. Knowing the rough location of the Stone of Divine Crusade, Zhang Xian swiftly made his way over with widened strides. Walking out of the stately hall, he found himself standing before a relatively vast courtyard. There were boulders all around the courtyard, forming a mini stone forest by its own. A few otherworldly demons were sitting not too far away from Zhang Xian. There were deep frowns on their faces, and some of them were scratching their heads in frustration, seemingly trying to figure out something incredibly profound. At the very center of the stone forest was a stone platform. A spherical boulder was placed atop the stone platform, and it emanated a warm glow. A silhouette seemed to be dancing along the spherical boulder. Somehow, the silhouette appeared a little familiar. Instead of rushing forward to confront the otherworldly demons, Zhang Xian hid himself and asked Little Amulet, "What are they doing?" Most likely, the spherical boulder at the very center was the Stone of Divine Crusade that Little Amulet had mentioned. Why were the otherworldly demons squatting around the area instead of going right in to claim it? It's not that they don't want to enter the stone forest, but they are unable to do so. It may seem simple enough to walk into the stone forest and claim the Stone of Divine Crusade, but the truth is that there's only a single way to enter the forest. All it takes is one wrong step to be completely devastated by sword chi. Little Amulet harumphed. Sword chi. Zhang Xian was taken aback. He quickly took another look and found that there were a couple of otherworldly demons lying by the side with their eyes tightly shut. They had already breathed their last breath. Do you know the correct path to entering the stone forest? Zhang Xian asked. I don't. Little Amulet replied with a shake of its head. This is a trial left behind by Kong Shi to test the later generations, so there's no way he would grant me knowledge of the answer. However, it's likely to have something to do with what you encountered in the previous domain. Take a closer look. Each of those boulders contain a certain movement of a technique. As long as you can sequence these movements correctly, you should be able to enter the stone forest without any trouble. I see, Zhang Xian replied contemplatively. He took a look at the boulders around the stone forest and found that they were made of a similar material to the other boulders in the outer dimension. It seemed like there was some kind of move infused into them. Flaws. Having prior experience tackling such a puzzle, Zhang Xian swiftly gathered all of the movements in the stone boulders and compiled them into a manual in the Library of Heaven's Path. As there was nothing that he could reference, there were a lot of mistakes. He altered the compiled manual according to the movements of the otherworldly demons in the stone forest, and the number of flaws immediately decreased. He continued to alter the manual over 100 times more before the sequence was finally corrected to its flawless form. All right, I am done deducing the sequence. Will I be able to pass through the stone forest by following this sequence? Zhang Xian asked once more for verification. As long as the sequence is correct, you should be able to get in without any trouble. However, there cannot be any mistakes at all. Otherwise, you'll have difficulties overcoming Kong Shi's sword chi. Little Amulet remarked worriedly. Zhang Xian nodded in response. Going through the sequence once more, he was just about to enter the stone forest when he suddenly halted. The movements of the boulders came together to form a complete technique. However, what if the technique in this stone forest was flawed? He was confident in the competence of the Library of Heaven's Path. Any technique that had gone through the verification of the Library of Heaven's Path had to be in its most perfect form. However, there was no guarantee that the person who had set up the stone forest would be correct. Such a situation had happened earlier in the stone forest dimension. The errors made by the silhouette there could still be corrected, but errors here could easily result in his death. Infernal Black Saber. After a moment of hesitation, Zhang Xian whipped out the Infernal Black Saber. Even if he came under a barrage of sword chi, the ancient sage Infernal Black Saber should still be able to withstand it. Following which, he summoned the Golden Origin Cauldron and the 5 monarchs. I'll be entering now. The rest of you follow behind me. If any of the otherworldly demons dare to wreak havoc, kill them without any hesitation. Don't let any of them escape. Then, he went through the sequence that he had derived using the Library of Heaven's Path, once more before making his way in. So far, he had not found the exit of the Stone Forest dimension. However, going by the rules of the other dimensions, it was likely that the exit was amid the boulders that reflected the technique that he had just grasped. After all, the crux of each dimension had always been the key to obtaining the ultimate treasure in the subordinate hall. If he had managed to get to the crux of the dimension, he would have known the correct sequence to clearing the stone forest before him and acquired the Stone of Divine Crusade. Since he was already there, it was too late for him to return to the stone forest dimension and experiment. Thus, he could only take a step at a time and pray fervently that the technique that Kong Shi had personally created had no flaws at all. Zhang Xian walked up to the very first boulder and brushed past it. However, he did not invoke the attack from the stone forest. He quickly continued proceeding deeper in. Taking a few more steps, he finally stumbled upon the otherworldly demons, who were scratching their heads for a solution. Too lazy to even make a move on them, Zhang Xian simply flitted past them and proceeded ahead. Ha! A fool rushing to his death. Seeing the human who had appeared out of nowhere charging in without the slightest hesitation, the otherworldly demons sneered coldly. It had taken the deaths of several of their companions in order for them to comprehend the rules of the stone forest. They knew that they could not mess around in the stone forest, or else they would suffer tragic deaths before they knew it. On the other hand, that fellow had actually charged randomly around the area as soon as he arrived. This worked in their favor too. They could use that fellow as a sacrificial pawn to help them scout out the road. With such thoughts in mind, they gazed upon the young man with contemptuous smiles on their faces. Yet, contrary to their expectations, the young man proceeded deeper and deeper into the stone forest, not sustaining the slightest damage at all. Slowly, the smiles on their faces faded. This isn't right. He seems to know the correct path. Quick, follow him. No matter how foolish they might have been, the truth could not have been more apparent after seeing this sight. It was obvious that the young man knew the right path. Thus, the leading otherworldly demon barked out an order and quickly traced Zhang Xian's trail. However, after taking a few steps, they suddenly felt an intense killing intent pouring down on them. Turning around, they saw a bunch of beasts and artifacts charging up to them. Get them! Ding Ding bellowed coldly, and the hordes of beasts and artifacts charged forth. Piliipala. A few minutes later, the otherworldly demons were left lying on the ground, their eyes bulging in disbelief, even after they had breathed their last breath. Passing through boulder after boulder, it did not take long for Zhang Xian to reach the stone platform at the very center. He could not help but frown in astonishment. I'm not getting attacked at all. Could it be that this technique has reached the level of a Heaven's Path technique as well? If that's the case, who in the world would be able to cultivate it? The sequence that he had used was based on the perfect manual that he had compiled using the Library of Heaven's Path, and it was actually the correct answer to clearing the stone forest. Did this not mean that the secret art left in this stone forest had also reached the level of a Heaven's Path technique? Could Kong Shi really possess the Library of Heaven's Path, just like me? Zhang Xian deduced contemplatively. Considering that this trial was in one of the subordinate halls, it was likely that the secret art had been left behind by Kong Shi. Zhang Xian was certain that it would be impossible for anyone who did not possess the Heaven's Path Shenxi to successfully practice any Heaven's Path technique. Otherwise, he would not have had to impart a simplified version to them each and every time. The fact that Kong Shi had created such a secret art meant that it was highly likely that the other party possessed the Heaven's Path Shenxi and was able to practice Heaven's Path techniques. The only possibility of that happening was if Kong Shi possessed the Library of Heaven's Path as well. Zhang Xian pondered on this matter for a while, but he knew that the only way to verify it was for him to meet Kong Shi once more. Thus, He decisively tossed the matter to the back of his head and calmed his mind down. Following which, he slowly walked up to the stone of divine crusade on top of the stone platform and grabbed it. Wang. Sensing Zhang Xian's approaching hand, the stone of divine crusade emanated a blinding light. In an instant, Zhang Xian felt as if someone had plunged his soul into the midst of burning lava, causing searing heat to suffuse his body. Given how Zhang Xian was able to survive even the Empyrean heavenly flame, what could heat of this level possibly do to him? He swiftly suppressed the burning sensation within before biting his finger and dripping a droplet of blood on the stone of divine crusade. It did not take long before the stone of divine crusade finally abandoned all attempts to retaliate and acknowledged him as its master. As soon as he received the acknowledgement of the stone of divine crusade, the searing sensation swiftly vanished, replaced with a feeling of warmth. As the silhouette on the stone of divine crusade moved, a surge of concentrated soul energy gushed into his body, nourishing his primordial spirit. Zhang Xian immediately knew that this was a good opportunity for him to push for a breakthrough, so he crossed his legs and sat down. He drew his primordial spirit out of his body and touched the stone of divine crusade. Hong long long. As concentrated soul energy flowed from the stone of divine crusade into his primordial spirit, Zhang Xian could feel himself growing stronger and stronger. It did not take long before his current bottleneck was torn down, and his soul cultivation surged into higher realms. 2 hours later, he had already reached Great Sage 3 Dan Intuitive Impulse Realm Consummation. After reaching that realm, the rate of advancement of his soul cultivation suddenly slowed considerably. Lowering his gaze, he noticed that the silhouette dancing on the stone of divine crusade had already come to a halt, as if fatigued from all its dancing. It seems like the stone of divine crusade needs to recharge. Zhang Xian chuckled softly. The stone of divine crusade harnessed concentrated soul energy that could be used to raise one's soul cultivation, but just like spirit stones, the amount of soul energy within it was limited. It could not supply an endless stream of soul energy. However, after taming the stone of divine crusade, Zhang Xian knew that unlike spirit stones, the stone of divine crusade was not a one-time use artifact. It could be reused once more after it was allowed to recharge for some time. Otherwise, it would not have been placed at the center of one of the subordinate halls, requiring one to overcome numerous trials to acquire. Now that my soul cultivation has reached the intuitive impulse realm, I wonder if that is possible. At the intuitive impulse realm, a cultivator would be able to vaguely sense the will of the heavens, allowing him to take steps to avert danger. As one who possessed the library of heaven's path, he knew that he would suffer the backlash of heavens if he raised his cultivation to that level. So he wondered if it would be the same for his soul cultivation as well. Thus, he returned his primordial spirit to his physical body and tried to grasp at the intangible will of the heavens. Kacha! Kacha! The next moment, a powerful streak of lightning descended from the heavens, causing his body to convulse under its might. Indeed, Zhang Xian's cheeks twitched as he grumbled with a darkened face. He had thought that his primordial spirit might be an exception to the rule, but it seemed like that was not the case. From the looks of it, it was impossible for him to try peering into the secrets of the heavens. Divine retribution would instantaneously fall upon him the moment that he tried to do so. However, the most powerful ability that intuitive impulse realm experts wielded was their ability to predict the future in advance. If he could not utilize that ability, his fighting prowess would be severely compromised. Since that could not be helped, he would just have to regard this as a simple advancement in his Jinqian strength. Previously, he would still have struggled a little to confront a sempiternal realm consummation expert with the Dragonbone Divine Spear. If he wanted to kill the other party, he would have to either launch an unexpected assault or use other means to support him. However, with the advancement in his soul cultivation, he could already crush the other party through sheer strength. Knowing that it would be hard for him to further advance his cultivation within a short period of time, Zhang Xian was just about to place the stone of divine crusade back into his storage ring when he heard an anxious voice. "Master, can you lend me that stone in your hand? Hearing that voice, Zhang Xian's eyes widened in agitation. Vicious, when did you wake up? He asked anxiously. The voice came from none other than Vicious, who had gone into hibernation while trying to assimilate his upper body. Zhang Xian did not think that the other party would awaken at a time like this. I woke up after sensing the soul energy emanated by the Stone of Divine Crusade. Master, can you lend me that for a use? My soul is currently a little weak, and that stone will help me swiftly recover from my weakness. Vicious requested. Zhang Xian was slightly surprised to see that Vicious was able to recognize the Stone of Divine Crusade, but considering that he had fought on equal terms with Kong Shi in the past, it was indeed likely that he would be well versed in the treasures of Kong Shi. But I have already absorbed all the soul energy in the Stone of Divine Crusade, Zhang Xian replied with a frown. Similar to a spirit stone devoid of spiritual energy, he did not see how the empty Stone of Divine Crusade would be of any use to Vicious. Master, if all the Stone of Divine Crusade is capable of storing soul energy, it would be unqualified to be considered as one of Kong Shi's prized possessions. Master, please bring me out and pass the stone to me, Vicious implored. All right then. Zhang Xian nodded. With a flick of his wrist, he took out the Book of Heaven's Path and placed the Stone of Divine Crusade on it. Voila! The Book of Heaven's Path opened, revealing half of Vicious' body. With a light tap, the Stone of Divine Crusade flew out and revolved steadily around the otherworldly demons who had been killed in the stone forest earlier. Wang. A few moments later, the silhouette on the surface of the Stone of Divine Crusade began moving once more as a brilliant light shone from it. The Stone of Divine Crusade, is absorbing the souls of others. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Through the eye of insight, he could see the Stone of Divine Crusade purifying the souls of the deceased otherworldly demons and converting them into concentrated soul energy. The Stone of Divine Crusade has the ability to cleanse and devour souls. To soul cultivators, it's a treasure on par with ancient sage artifacts. In fact, the Seal of Souls of the Soul Oracle Guild is made out of the same material as the Stone of Divine Crusade. Vicious explained. Find authorized novels in webnovel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. The Seal of Souls is made out of the same material? Zhang Xian was stunned for a moment before widening his eyes in realization. It was no wonder he found the Stone of Divine Crusade rather familiar. So that was the reason. One must know that the Seal of Souls was currently sitting quietly in his storage ring. It was just that he had not really used it yet. To be able to absorb souls and convert them into concentrated soul energy. The ability of the Stone of Divine Crusade is indeed terrifying. Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. If all the Stone of Divine Crusade was capable of doing was supplying one with concentrated soul energy between long intervals, it would be unworthy of being called an ultimate treasure. After all, there were probably plenty of resources out there that could substitute it. However, if it was able to recharge swiftly as well by absorbing and cleansing souls, it would indeed be a formidable artifact worthy of becoming any major clan's family heirloom. You can hold on to it. The ability of the Stone of Divine Crusade could be said to be a malevolent one. However, Zhang Xian believed that it was foolish to classify artifacts as malevolent or benevolent. Ultimately, it depended on who was using it. In the hands of a good person, even the most vicious weapon could be used for good. Conversely, in the hands of a bad person, even the most seemingly harmless object could be used for evil. Thinking back, the trial to obtain the Stone of Divine Crusade had been unbelievably harsh. The requirement to clear the stone forest was actually to cultivate a secret art that had reached the level of Heaven's Path. And this was a feat impossible for any cultivators without the library of Heaven's Path. Somehow, Zhang Xian felt as if Kong Shi was aware of his existence. It was as if the Stone of Divine Crusade had been left just for him. After all, no one other than him could have reached the Stone of Divine Crusade. Thank you, Master. Vicious thanked Zhang Xian in agitation, following which, he began to absorb the soul energy of the Stone of Divine Crusade and reinforce his soul. How far has your strength recovered after assimilating your upper body? Zhang Xian asked as he watched Vicious recovering more and more as he absorbed the energy from the Stone of Divine Crusade. Vicious had recovered a great deal by assimilating his finger, head, and eyes. Considering how huge his entire upper body was, he should be able to raise his cultivation significantly by assimilating it as well. Master, my strength is currently equivalent to a newly ascended ancient sage. Vicious replied. Ancient sage. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. He had been wondering if Vicious fighting prowess would be raised to ancient sage after assimilating the upper body. And that was indeed the case. Even if Vicious only wielded strength comparable to a new ancient sage, given his previous fighting experience, the chances were that he would be far stronger than the ancient sage otherworldly demon corpse that he had forged. Paired with the infernal black saber, that would be equivalent to having a real ancient sage protecting him all the time. He would not have to be too worried about his safety for the time being. My upper body has been suppressed under the sanctum of sages for tens of thousands of years, and all of the killing intent within has pretty much been squeezed out, leaving behind nothing but pure power. In my current state, I should be able to pass off as a master teacher while using my powers without anyone seeing through it. Vicious added. That's really great. Zhang Xian clenched his fists tightly in agitation. Even with his standing on the master-teacher continent, it would still be unsafe for him to get too involved with the otherworldly demons. Considering the tension between mankind and the otherworldly demonic tribe, a simple accusation that he was colluding with the otherworldly demonic tribe could land him in deep trouble. Thus, as far as he could, he wanted to distance himself from any possible connections with the enemy. Considering how Sage Kuei was Kong Shi's grand student, as well as the fact that he had made use of his sculpture and the academic aura in the Sanctum of Sages to suppress Vicious' upper body for tens of thousands of years, it was no wonder that the killing intent within had been purified. With this, he would be able to use Vicious without worrying about others misunderstanding him. All right, I'll leave you to recover your soul. Try to get to your peak as soon as possible. Knowing that he had yet another powerful trump card in his possession, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief before making his way out of the stone forest. The open temple of Confucius had attracted many ancient sages, and it was likely that some of them bore malicious intentions toward him. The stronger Vicious was, the greater the guarantee on his safety. In any case, it would never hurt to be more careful. Stowing his artifacts and tamed beasts away, Zhang Xian returned to the hall and collected the paintings on the wall one after another. Then he turned around and headed to the entrance. Leaving the Hall of Divine Crusade, he saw that there was a large group of master teachers outside, sitting around the perimeter of the subordinate hall, still deeply focused on learning the secret arts inscribed on the walls. Where else could Yuan Tao be if he isn't here? Zhang Xian frowned. The fact that there were only otherworldly demons there meant that the 100 schools of philosophers had not been there. If that was the case, where did Yuan Tao go? Zhang Xian intended to return to the stone forest dimension to continue searching for Yuan Tao when he suddenly felt something. He flicked his wrist and took out his communication jade token. There was a line of words on the token. Zhang Xian, come to the Apricot Pavilion as soon as you can. A message from Luo Ruoxin? Apricot Pavilion. Where is the Apricot Pavilion? Wait a moment. Is it possible to send messages across different dimensions? Zhang Xian was confused. He had tried when he first arrived, and the conclusion that he had come to was that the communication jade token only worked when they were in the same dimensions. Yet he had received Luo Ruoxin's message. He was certain that the Apricot Pavilion was not in that dimension, or he would have already seen it. When did it become possible to send messages across different dimensions? If it was possible to do so, why had he not been able to reach Luo Ruoxin or his parents earlier on? As if sensing Zhang Xian's doubt, Luo Ruoxin sent another message over. The Apricot Pavilion corresponds to the desert dimension. I'll wait for you in the desert dimension. Desert dimension? Zhang Xian repeated with a frown. He pondered for a brief moment before returning to the stone forest dimension. As he knew where the various exits were, it did not take him long to backtrack to the desert dimension. At that moment, there was no longer any sweltering heat in the desert dimension. Spiritual energy suffused the area. Except for the fact that there was no greenery or native beasts in the dimension, its environment bore some similarities to the forest dimension that he had been in. Most of the cultivators who had entered the desert dimension chose to sit down on the spot to cultivate, and their hard work had been significantly rewarded. The intuitive impulse realm cultivator, whom he had been with earlier, had achieved a breakthrough to the sempiternal realm as well after several hours of absence. At the same time, he also looked much younger in terms of appearance. Knowing that this was the mystical effects of the Temple of Confucius, Zhang Xian did not dwell too much on it. He quickly determined the direction to the oasis and flitted over. It did not take long before he found Luo Ruoxin and Wu Chun. "You're here," Luo Ruoxin remarked with a smile. As if seeing right through Zhang Xian's doubts, she explained, "The dimensions in the Temple of Confucius have already been opened. It's no surprise that we are able to send messages to one another now that the space has been joined together." "The space has been joined together?" Zhang Xian taken aback for a moment before widening his eyes in realization. It seemed like when he opened an exit, he was effectively joining two dimensions together. Considering how master teachers were now able to traverse from dimension to dimension without any trouble, it was not surprising that messages were able to do the same. "How did you know that this dimension corresponds to the Apricot Pavilion?" Zhang Xian asked. It was impossible to know what the name of the subordinate hall was before entering it. If Luo Ruoxin knew such details about the Temple of Confucius, why did she not tell him in advance? Considering how some people have already been to the exteriors of the Temple of Confucius, it isn't too surprising that I know. Not only so, I have also managed to find out the details of the other subordinate halls, Luo Ruoxin said. All in all, the 6 subordinate halls are the Great Kuei Hall of Literature, Apricot Pavilion, Twin Auxiliary Halls, Hall of Great Accomplishment, Hall of Lull, and Hall of Divine Crusade. Those from the 100 schools of philosophers possess the celestial amulet of legacy to enter the Great Kuei Hall of Literature, and they have already taken away Kong Shi's entire collection of books. The Master Teacher Pavilion has the amulet to enter the Twin Auxiliary Halls. The amulets in the possession of the Luo clan, Zhang clan, and otherworldly demonic tribe correspond to the Hall of Lull, Hall of Great Accomplishment, and Hall of Divine Crusade respectively. Those places have already been opened and explored, leaving only the Apricot Pavilion behind. If I'm not mistaken, you are the one who took the crux of the desert dimension away, right? Let's enter the Apricot Pavilion together and see how we can obtain the ultimate treasure of this subordinate hall. Are you referring to this seedling? Zhang Xian asked. Luo Ruoxin nodded in response. We need to hurry up. There are already a couple of people there, and the 100 schools of philosophers are also intending to use Yuan Tao's emperor bloodline to get into the Apricot Pavilion. I'm not too sure what exactly they are intending to do. I understand. Hearing that Yuan Tao was in the area as well, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Let's go in. Luo Ruoxin turned to Wu Chun. Wu Chun nodded before tapping his finger upward. Selah. A crack appeared in the space above the oasis, and a spatial passageway formed before their eyes. Vaguely, one could see a grand palace at the very end of the passageway. Tearing apart space with just a single finger? Zhang Xian frowned. Having been to the desert dimension before, he knew how resilient its space was. At the very least, one had to reach ancient sage in order to be able to tear apart its space. Yet Wu Chun was able to pierce through it with just a single finger, much more easily than what the infernal black saber was capable of. Could it be that he had stumbled upon his own fortuitous encounter and successfully advanced to ancient sage? Let's go. Luo Ruoxin noted the confusion in Zhang Xian's eyes, but perhaps because they were in a rush, she did not explain the matter to him. Instead, she took the lead and flew into the spatial passageway. Zhang Xian followed closely behind her. Just like the previous few times that he had arrived in an exterior of the Temple of Confucius, he found himself standing before a towering building after traveling for some time. There were two massive words inscribed on the entrance plaque that radiated faint light. Apricot Pavilion. Just as Luo Ruoxin had said, there were a lot of people gathered outside the Apricot Pavilion. There were some from the 100 schools of philosophers, some from the otherworldly demonic tribe, and a couple of those from the beast tribe as well. Heavy tension weighed in the air, although the different parties did not come to blows with one another. They seemed to be waiting patiently for the final subordinate hall of the Temple of Confucius to be opened. Vaguely, one could feel overwhelming auras lingering in the background. It seemed like the only reason that they were enjoying this eerie transient peace was because of the ancient sages tying one another down. Zhang Shi. As soon as Zhang Xian arrived in the area as well, Ren Shi from the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters immediately headed forward to greet him. Following which, the Luo clan's Luo Ganzhen, Jiang clan's Jiang Fangyu, and a couple other powerhouses from the Master Teacher continent gathered around him. It seemed like those people had stumbled upon their own fortuitous encounters as well. Just like his parents, they had all reached sempiternal realm consummation. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Zhang Xian realized that other than the 6 outer dimensions and the subordinate halls, there were a few unique space-time regions in the Temple of Confucius. Those who managed to stumble upon one would find their flow of time accelerating, and overcoming the bottlenecks that they faced in their cultivation would be much easier. From the looks of it, it was clear that they had benefited greatly from the Temple of Confucius, and their journey had not been wasted. On the contrary, it seemed like it was only Zhang Xian, who had been busy wandering around the area, and did not spend too much time cultivating, who was lagging behind the others. First and foremost, I should save Yuan Tao. While he was chatting, Zhang Xian caught sight of Yuan Tao's figure amid the crowd where the offspring of the 100 schools of philosophers were gathered. Just like Zhao Ye and Wei Ruyan, Yuan Tao's senses had been sealed, so he could not sense that Zhang Xian was in the vicinity. Upon seeing that Zhang Xian was intending to head over, Ren Shi hurriedly tried to persuade him. Zhang Shi, the ancient sages have already announced that the different powers aren't to make a move on one another. Anyone who violates the rules will be killed on the spot. That's a rule that the ancient sages decided upon in order to secure the safety of the younger generation. Otherwise, if a battle erupted and all of their geniuses, who have a chance of advancing to ancient sage, were killed, their journey here would have been in vain. Luo Ganzhen added, given the current circumstances, it would be best not to get into a conflict with them. Besides, with our ancient sages around, I doubt that they will dare harm Yuan Tao. Zhang Xian knew that what Luo Ganzhen said was right, but he could not help hesitating. They're right, Luo Ruoxin remarked with a smile. The 100 schools of philosophers won't harm Yuan Tao yet. If we make a reckless move here, the situation could take a turn for the worse. It would be better to save him after we enter the Apricot Pavilion, where the ancient sages can no longer interfere. Besides, this might also be a good opportunity for Yuan Tao. Good opportunity? Zhang Xian frowned. The Apricot Pavilion is the area where Kong Shi imparted his teachings to others, so his words echo within the entire building. Since the 100 schools of philosophers has kidnapped Yuan Tao, it's certain that they have made preparations for something with his emperor bloodline. This could be an opportunity for him, and it would be a huge loss if we saved him right now. Taking a step back, even if he is placed in a dangerous position, we can step in and save him at any moment, Luo Ruoxin said. Zhang Xian nodded in realization. He did not know that the Apricot Pavilion was the place where Kong Shi had imparted his teachings to others. Back then, when he was still in the Hongyuan Empire, he had made a reputation for himself with his impartation of heavens, while by inducing the breakthrough of cultivators, animals, and even plants. Considering that Kong Shi was far stronger than him, his teachings were bound to be on a far higher level. It was no wonder a mere root was able to trap so many powerful experts at once. Most likely, the root had also listened to Kong Shi's teachings, and its sentience blossomed, thus bestowing it extraordinary capabilities. It's going to open very soon. While the few of them were talking among themselves, a loud rumbling sound reminiscent of thunder echoed from the underground. Following which, the seal shrouding the apricot pavilion emanated a brilliant flash of light. With the experience from the Hall of Great Accomplishment, Zhang Xian knew that this was a sign that the subordinate hall was about to open, and his hands could not help but tremble slightly in anticipation. Wang. Soon, the massive gates slowly creaked open. "Let's go," a person amid the crowd bellowed. After that, Yuan Tao made an incision at the tip of his finger and squeezed out a droplet of blood. The energy within the blood swiftly enveloped the group from the 100 schools of philosophers, and they began making their way to the seal. They were able to slip right through the seal without any issues. A lot of the otherworldly demons also made their way to the seal as well. It was unsure what kind of secret art they used, but shockingly, they were actually able to bypass the seal to enter the apricot pavilion. Noting the doubtful look on Zhang Xian's face, Luo Ruoxin telepathically explained, "There are some otherworldly demons who possess similar constitutions to Yuan Tao." Hearing that, Zhang Xian nodded in response. Unique constitutions were not a trait unique to just humans. It was not too surprising that the otherworldly demons had unique constitutions similar to those of humans. Hula. After the otherworldly demons entered, those from the beast tribe quickly flew toward the seal as well. Unlike the other two groups, they threw an amulet into the air, and the amulet swiftly enveloped them in a unique layer of energy. It was the last celestial amulet of legacy. As many had guessed, it was really in the hands of the beast tribe. "Let's enter as well." Seeing that most of the powers had entered the subordinate hall, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist and took little amulet. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. He was just about to shroud the entire crowd with the powers of little amulet when Wu Chen suddenly clasped his fist and said, "Milady and Zhang Shi, I'll wait outside for the two of you." After saying those words, he took a step back and retreated from the area shrouded by little amulet. As if knowing that Wu Chen would make such a decision, Luo Ruoxin nodded calmly in response. Let's go." Zhang Xian was perplexed. He's already an ancient sage. Even with the powers of the prime amulet, he won't be able to enter the subordinate hall. Luo Ruoxin explained. As expected, hearing Luo Ruoxin admitting it, Zhang Xian nodded in realization. He had guessed that earlier, but to think that it was actually true. It seemed like the aeon of ancient sage in the Hall of Great Accomplishment was not the only way for one to achieve a breakthrough to ancient sage in the Temple of Confucius. Most likely, Wu Chen had stumbled upon some fortuitous encounter of his own. Halala! Zhang Xian released some of the tamed beasts from his myriad anthive nest, and brought Luo Gan's hen, Jiang Fangyu, and the others into the majestic palace before him instead. Unlike the other subordinate halls, what lay beyond the entrance was not a vast room, but a courtyard that spanned a diameter of 100 meters. At the very center was a towering altar locked down by some kind of seal. Nevertheless, an oppressive aura could be felt drifting forth from it, keeping everyone at bay. On the two sides of the towering altar were dozens of apricot trees, planted neatly in 2 rows. It was still in the midst of winter in the apricot hall, so the trees had already shed their leaves, leaving behind forlorn branches. The space directly in front of the towering altar was filled with round cushions. With just a swift glance, Zhang Xian could tell that there were at least 3,000 of them. Most likely, this corresponded to Kong Shi's 3,000 students. So this is the apricot pavilion. Zhang Xian frowned. He had thought that the place would appear to be more sacred or deific. Contrary to his expectations, it looked very ordinary. When Kong Shi imparted his teachings, his students would be listening below. Luo Ruoxin explained with a nod. Don't underestimate this place. As shabby as it might appear to you, it's actually the most important location in the Temple of Confucius aside from the Prime Hall. It's the most important location aside from the Prime Hall? Zhang Xian frowned in confusion. Other than the towering altar and a couple of trees, There was nothing that seemed to be of significance within this courtyard. He honestly could not tell how important this treasures was supposed to be. Kong Shi's importation of heavens will reach an advanced level. Those cushions and apricot trees likely possess lives of their own. Otherwise, those from the 100 schools of philosophers would have already charged right ahead to the altar. They wouldn't be standing there motionlessly, clearly biding their time. Luo Ruoxin told Zhang Xian telepathically. Hearing those words, Zhang Xian's eyebrows leaped up in astonishment. When he utilized the importation of heavens will back at the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, he had managed to instill spirit even within ordinary weapons. As such, it was no wonder that Kong Shi was able to bestow sentience upon mere cushions and trees. Seeing that the 100 schools of philosophers were dawdling in front, refusing to proceed at all, one of the beasts impatiently growled, "Are you all heading forward or not? Otherwise, we'll be making our way over first. If you aren't going to enter, we'll be moving ahead of you. You'd better not dream of snatching whatever treasure we obtain from us, or else we'll give you hell to pay for." Another beast spat coldly. A young man from the 100 schools of philosophers, seemingly their leader, chuckled softly and said, "Feel free to enter if you wish to. We're intending to wait a little longer." He was none other than the scholarly young man whom Zhang Xian had encountered at the White Creek Mountain, the descendant of ancient sage Ziyuan, Yin Shui. So be it. Seeing that the 100 schools of philosophers was really not intending to make a move, the beast harumphed coldly. "A useless bunch of cowards you lot are. Since they don't dare enter, let's go in." With that, the beast began dashing toward the cushions right in front. From experience, the beast knew that even the most ordinary-looking object in the Temple of Confucius could possibly be an invaluable treasure. Considering how these cushions had remained perfectly intact even after the passing of tens of thousands of years, there was no doubt that there was something special about them. Hula! But before the beast could even reach the cushions, the sharp sound of something piercing through the air echoed. It hurriedly turned its head around, only to see a tree branch surging in its direction. The branch's movement was so forceful that it tore a black rift in its path of motion. Whoa! At the same time, a couple of apricot trees marched forward and encircled the beasts. A mere couple of trees actually dare to block our path? Dream on. The beast who had spoken earlier raised its talons and swiped it down. Its talons were incredibly sharp, possibly on par with great sage artifacts. With its aggressive move, the surrounding space shuddered a little, and small pitch-black dimension rifts appeared in the air. The talons and fangs of those from the beast tribe were top-notch materials for forging great sage artifacts. Furthermore, the beast wielded strength on par with the 5 monarchs. Even sempiternal realm consummation master teachers would have trouble defending against its assault. Under normal circumstances, such sharp talons should have been more than enough to tear the tree branches into shreds. Yet, before those talons could reach their target, a resounding paw sound suddenly echoed in the air. A glaring laceration appeared on the face of the beast. A tree branch had materialized from nowhere and whipped the beast right in its face. Roar! The burning pain on its face left the beast feeling deeply humiliated and frenzied. It swiped its claws furiously against the tree branches ahead of it, creating a nearly impregnable wall of attacks before it. Despite that, the tree branch was still able to slip past its defenses during crucial moments and accurately strikes its areas of weakness. Before long, the body of the beast was already covered with glaring lacerations, and fresh blood flowed ceaselessly from its body. Seeing that their leader was in a disadvantageous position, the remaining beasts immediately rushed forward to offer their support. However, as tree branches whipped through the air, it did not take long for them to be grounded on the floor, completely powerless to retaliate at all. Seeing such a sight, the eyebrows of the crowd twitched frenziedly. They were unable to believe what they were seeing. Those of the beast tribe were known to possess superior physical prowess compared to average cultivators. Yet they were all done in by a single apricot tree. Witnessing such a sight, the scholarly young man, Yin Shui, chuckled softly before closing his eyes, as if he had expected things to end in such a manner. A young man from the 100 Schools of Philosophers walked up to Yin Shui and asked with a suppressed voice, "Shall we make a move? If we could save them right now, we might be able to win their gratitude and successfully tame them." Considering how badly those beasts were being pummeled, if they could intervene at this moment and save them, it was very likely that they could win their goodwill and convince them to serve as their tamed beasts. There's no need for that. Putting aside the fact that it's uncertain whether we'll be able to save them or not, just the fact that we didn't stop them earlier is enough to turn their hostility toward us. Yin Shui replied calmly. Besides, these apricot trees only serve to halt intruders from proceeding any further. They won't kill anyone, so you don't have to worry. All right then. The young man nodded. It was indeed likely that those beasts would harbor some grudges toward them for not stopping them when they attempted to advance earlier. Even if they were to step forward and save them right now, those beasts would only take it as if they were trying to humiliate them. In the worst-case scenario, the beasts might even direct their wrath toward them. Those beasts won't be able to get away. Once we succeed, they will follow us around obediently. Then, we won't be able to shake them off even if we want to. Yin Shui chuckled softly. At this moment, however, a young man at the very back of the crowd suddenly dashed forward as swift as a bolt of lightning. Who? In the blink of an eye, he was already right before the beasts. He adeptly weaved a net using his jinchi and dragged all of the beasts out of the attacking range of the apricot trees. "Thank you for saving our lives." Knowing that the young man was trying to save them, the beasts turned to him with looks of gratitude. However, contrary to expectations, the young man suddenly dashed right into their midst and, palipala, fists and kicks were hurled here and there. The beasts were stunned. Those from the 100 Schools of Philosophers and the otherworldly demonic tribe were stunned as well. Find authorized novels and web novel faster updates. Better experience, please click www.wenovel.com for visiting. They had thought that the young man had saved those beasts in order to win their goodwill and successfully recruit them to his side. Yet, after saving them from the whipping branches of the apricot trees, he proceeded to pummel them by himself. What the heck? The apricot trees also stared at one another in confusion. The tree branches that they had extended to teach the young man a lesson for interfering in their affairs retracted in apprehension. They had thought that the young man was trying to save those beasts from them, but it turned out that he wanted to pummel them as well. Was it because their whipping had awakened something in the depths of his heart, and he wanted to give it a try? This is our opportunity. Yin Shui was stunned for a moment before a confident smile crept onto his lips. He immediately turned to the other offspring of the 100 Schools of Philosophers and urged, "Those beasts are being unjustly tortured by that young man over there. As long as we step forward to stop that young man, we'll be able to win their gratitude and loyalty." Yes. Hearing those words, the crowd nodded in agreement. The beasts there had all reached sempiternal realm consummation. Taming any one of them would mean a massive surge in their fighting prowess. If they could return to the 100 Schools of Philosophers with even one of them, their standing would surely rise through the ranks. Let's save those beasts from the distress they are in. Thus, the young men hurriedly rushed forward and brandished the swords in their hands toward the young man physically abusing those beasts. "What are you doing? Stop your ridiculous actions. It's fate that we met here. Friends from the beast tribe, we can't watch idly as you are bullied by this young man. Friends from the beast tribe, we are here to save you." The young men issued resounding declarations, spouting righteous words one after another. In that moment, they seemed like heroes who had taken it upon themselves to vanquish the world of evil. Those fellows sure catch on fast. Yin Shui nodded in approval. They know what they have to do in order to win the gratitude of those beasts. As long as they win the goodwill of the beasts, it will be much easier for them to tame them afterward. He was just about to continue issuing a few more orders to direct the situation when his eyes suddenly bulged out of his eyes. An utterly horrified expression appeared on his face as an expletive escaped from his mouth. Shit! What the heck is happening now? Before the swords of his comrades could even strike the young man pummeling those beasts, the beasts roared furiously. They swiped their claws and swept their tails toward his comrades. And in the blink of an eye, the geniuses of the 100 schools of philosophers were lying on the ground, bruised all over. Not only so, the de facto leader of the beast tribe even howled in fury. What the heck are you lot from the 100 schools of philosophers trying to pull? Try hindering us one more time from getting pummeled, and I swear that I'll eat all of you alive. This bunch of idiots. Can't you all see that we are enjoying the pummeling that this expert is bestowing upon us? Shameless hero wannabes, scram and stop bothering us. The beasts bellowed with the utmost fury. After sending the crowd flying, they turned back to the young man and pitifully pleaded, "Please continue to hit us as hard as you can. Please. Harder. Harder." Yen Shui and the others clutched their hair in frenzy. The eyes of the otherworldly demons also grew as wide as chicken eggs, and they even forgot to gulp down their saliva. The apricot trees had also stopped moving, and their branches had fallen to the wintry ground out of utter shock. It was as if they could not process what was going on. Those of the beast tribe had always been known to be haughty and egoistical. Why in the world were they deriving joy from being pummeled like that? There had been cries of agony, not cries of delight, when the apricot trees were pummeling them earlier. Did something weird awaken in them during this short period of time? Submit to me, and I'll beat you up whenever I have time. Zhang Xian waved his hand grandly. The hide of the beasts was a little too thick. His hand was starting to hurt from all the pummeling that he had done. That would be our pleasure. Paying respects to master. Long live our master. Wu. Walla. The next moment, all of the beasts kneeled onto the ground with proud looks on their faces. It was clear that they did not think that it was beneath them to acknowledge the young man as their master. Kacha. Yen Shui tugged out a clump of hair from the top of his head, but too overwhelmed with shock, he could not feel anything at all. The heck? What the hell are you all feeling so proud about? You are going to become someone's tamed beasts. No matter how high your standing may be, it doesn't change the fact that you are a mere pet. A pet, do you get it? Is this something to be happy about? To actually submit to someone else after being pummeled? When did those of the beast tribe become so easy to tame? After taming the beasts, the young man waved his hand before walking into the midst of the apricot trees. All right, I have exacted vengeance for you. Seeing how the young man had become so bloated up after taming those beasts, Yen Shui could not help but sneer coldly. He's courting death. Whatever tricks he had used on the beasts in order to tame them, there was no way that it would work on the apricot trees. Those apricot trees were existences that had heard Kong Shi's teachings. Confronting them was no different from courting death. Before Yen Shui's contemptuous gaze, the young man had finally arrived right before the apricot trees. Hula! The apricot trees swiftly encircled the young man, leaving no room for the latter to retreat at all. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.